come to order. Without objection, the chair is authorized to declare a recess of the committee at any time. The hearing is entitled Oversight of the FDIC's Failed Leadership and Toxic Workplace Culture. Without objection, all members will have 5 legislative days within which to submit extraneous materials to the chair for inclusion in the record. I will note at the outset here, and for scheduling purposes for the committee and our panelists, we have a vote series that will be called at 10:30 this morning. That was why I was interested in getting the committee started on time, though we're a little late. We will go as long as we can. We'll recess for committee floor votes and return once the series is concluded. I urge members to return as soon as possible. We'll start questioning as soon as we have a sufficient number to do that. I'll now recognize myself for 4 minutes for an opening statement. At our May hearing to conduct oversight of the prudential regulators, members of both sides of the aisle expressed interest in holding a separate hearing on misconduct at the FDIC and the Cleary Gottlieb report. To my colleagues, I heard you. Today's hearing is focused exclusively on the FDIC's toxic workplace culture and Chair Grunberg's abusive behavior. To our witnesses, we thank you for being here today. Your commitment to transparency has not gone unnoticed. Just days after our last hearing, Chair Grunberg announced his intent to resign at some undetermined future date. His resignation should have been welcome news to the FDIC employees who have been subjected to an appalling culture of misconduct and abuse, but it was all a farce. Resigning after the confirmation of a new chair is just more of the status quo. Chair Grunberg knows this, which is why he told employees at the FDIC to continue as if he would be there until the end of the year. That is outrageous. This, though, is part and parcel of Mr. Grunberg's failure to accept responsibilities for his own actions. His approach to a long overdue cultural overhaul of the FDIC seems to be deny, deflect, and delay. Case in point, 3 weeks after the White House pledged to move quickly to replace him, we have yet to see a successor even nominated. Deep institutional changes at the FDIC are needed now, not later, which is why I called on President Biden to fire Chair Grunberg for cause. There's a clear succession plan in place. The agency's operations would continue unabated if he rightfully stepped down today. So what's the delay? The Inspector General, Wall Street Journal, and Cleary Gottlieb all outlined important misconduct at every level of the agency in painstaking detail. But based on Chair Grunberg's claims, we're supposed to believe he somehow missed this appalling behavior while leading the agency for 10 of the last 13 years. It's clear any cultural change will happen in spite of his presence, not because of it. The consequences of Chair Grunberg's failed leadership go further than the 4 walls of the FDIC, though. The events that have unfolded over the last 15 months in our financial system involved him directly or the FDIC under his watch, which include 3 major bank failures last March, including Signature Bank, which was directly under his supervision. In April, Chair Grunberg's chief risk officer reviewed the FDIC's actions leading up to Signature Bank's failure and concluded staffing, whether it be shortages or communication issues, was a major issue. In November, revelations came to light about the FDIC's toxic culture and Chair Grunberg's own abusive behavior towards staff, tasked with bringing him, quote, bad news, end quote. It is fair to conclude that Chair Grunberg's behavior directly impacted the FDIC's response to last year's banking turmoil. He moved slowly, couldn't make decisions, and undoubtedly lashed out at his own employees for presenting him information. So I asked the White House and my Democratic colleagues, does your own agenda really outweigh the need for a competent leader at the helm of the FDIC? With the well-being of the agency, its 6,000 employees, our financial system as well, it's time for Democrats to join Republicans in calling for an immediate change in leadership at the FDIC. With that, I yield back. The chair now recognizes the ranking member of the full committee, the gentlewoman from California, for 4 minutes for the purposes of an opening statement.
Good morning. Thank you to our witnesses for being here today, including Acting Comptroller Sue, who testified just a few weeks ago. As committee, Democrats have made it very, very clear all FDIC employees deserve a safe work environment. Unfortunately, as the Cleary report details, this has been the case under the leadership of both Republican and Democratic chairs. In fact, according to the report, the FDIC has had a troubling workplace culture since 1980. I'm pleased that the FDIC has begun implementing the reforms necessary, and I'm pleased that the White House is reportedly nominating a proven leader, CFTC Commissioner Christy Goldsmith Romero, to lead this effort as FDIC chair. However, I am concerned that the report we are discussing may not tell the full story. For example, while the report focuses on the current chair, I want to know why the report doesn't examine how and why former FDIC Chair Jelena McWilliams and her senior staff, including the current FDIC Vice Chair Travis Hill, did not do more to ensure FDIC workers had a safe workplace during their tenure, both before and after the Inspector General identified a number of concerns relating to sexual harassment way back in 2020. Additionally, the chair does not include critical data needed to understand the location and rate of misconduct over time and which types of misconduct are currently the most prevalent. My staff asked Cleary to provide this information, but they did not. This information could significantly impact what types of reforms the FDIC leadership should prioritize and where they should be implemented. Now, while this committee should be focused on the employees and exploring ways to strengthen worker protections, Republicans are attacking the Democratic chair, who has already announced he will step down. But you won't hear them call for Republican Vice Chair Travis Hill to step down, despite him being a senior official under former Chair McWilliams when allegations of misconduct persisted. I also wonder whether my colleagues will call for anyone who has been found liable for sexual abuse to stand down from holding other positions of power in government, like, for example, the former president and top Republican. He is not only an adjudicated sexual abuser, but also the first and only former president to be criminally convicted of not one, not two, but 34 felonies relating to violating election laws. Twice impeached, he also faces 3 more criminal indictments for his efforts to overturn the election and steal highly sensitive and classified national security documents and stash them at his Mar-a-Lago resort. Thankfully, President Biden is quickly taking steps to protect workers at the FDIC by reportedly nominating CFTC Commissioner Christy Goldsmith Romero to serve as FDIC chair. Commissioner Goldsmith Romero has a long track record of working to protect our nation's investors, consumers, and taxpayers. When she served as Special Inspector General for the Troubled Asset Relief Program, she successfully held accountable bank executives who engaged in financial crimes and fraud. She has been unanimously confirmed by the Senate twice. If Republicans are committed to changing the work culture at the FDIC, I expect that they will join with Democrats to support her swift Senate confirmation. I yield back.
We'll now recognize the chair of the Oversight Subcommittee, Mr. Huizinga, for 1 minute.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. We'll continue to hear Democrat colleagues today attempt to deflect blame, and we will continue to hear a litany of reasons why Chairman Grunberg is the right man at the right time with the right ideas to reform the FDIC. However, one simple fact remains. Chairman Grunberg is a failed leader who has put politics and a radical progressive agenda over doing what is right. He has put himself and his own ego before the FDIC employees and the well-being of the agency that he reportedly loves. Mr. Chairman, the independent report, which findings have been accepted by everyone here today, was clear on one thing: culture starts at the top. For nearly 2 decades, Mr. Grunberg has failed to recognize how his own misconduct negatively affects his own employees. Mr. Chairman, it's time for new leadership. It's time to let the agency heal. The safety and soundness of our banking system is at risk under his leadership, and Chairman Grunberg should resign immediately or be removed by the president. I yield back.
Gentleman yields back. The ranking member of the Subcommittee on Oversight and Investigations, Mr. Green, is recognized for 1 minute.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I thank the ranking member as well, and I associate myself with the comments of the ranking member. Mr. Chairman, Chair Grunberg has stated that he will step down. He will step down from his position once a successor is confirmed. I'd like to thank President Biden for putting forth a capable, competent, and qualified nominee. And I encourage the Senate to confirm this nominee as quickly as possible. Confirm this nominee who will rectify the toxic causality that resulted in opprobrious conduct at the FDIC. I do concur with the ranking member. The employees, the persons who work there and all facets of work, deserve a safe and secure work environment. I trust that the chair and his successor, the new chair who will succeed Grunberg, will work prudently to strengthen banking regulations, capital requirements, as well as rein in incentive-based executive compensation that encourages excess risk-taking, and again, produce a safe work environment. I thank you, and I yield back.
Gentleman yields back. I'll note for the record that while my Democrat colleagues may be front-running the White House, we've yet to see the full nomination presented. The press reports indicated, and now our Democrat colleagues are saying it. So we'll now recognize the testimony of the distinguished panel today. Mr. Michael Hsu, co-chair of the Special Committee of the Federal Deposit Insurance Corporation. Mr. Joon Kim, partner of the law firm Cleary, Gottlieb, Steen, and Hamilton, LLP. Ms. Abena Mainoo, also a partner with the law firm of Cleary, Gottlieb, Steen, and Hamilton, LLP. And the Honorable Jonathan McKernan, co-chair of the Special Committee of the Federal Deposit Insurance Corporation. I would note Chair Grunberg's absence. Originally, the committee noticed and announced he would participate in today's hearing. Unfortunately, he did have a personal conflict. We look forward to his appearance before the committee in the future. I'd like to thank each of our witnesses for your being here. You'll each be given 5 minutes to give an oral presentation of your testimony. Without objection, your written testimony will be made a part of the record. Mr. Hsu, we'll begin with you.
Thank you, Chairman McHenry, Ranking Member Waters, and members of the committee. I'm testifying today in my capacity as a director on the board of the FDIC and as co-chair of the Special Review Committee, which was established to oversee the independent third-party review of the agency's workplace and culture. In these roles, my objective has been to protect the people of the FDIC. That has been my top priority and North Star throughout the entire process. The employees of the FDIC need and deserve a safe and inclusive workplace, and they need it now. My joint written statement with Director and Special Review Committee Co-Chair Jonathan McKernan describes the processes by which the independent third-party reviewer was selected and how their review and report were overseen. At each and every stage of the process, we sought to ensure that the review and report were independent, credible, and fair. I believe we achieved that and strongly support the report's findings and recommendations. Most importantly, the report provides a clear roadmap to address and remedy the pervasive problems at the FDIC. The agency must implement its recommendations immediately. I want to reemphasize today the urgent need for actions, not words. I am especially focused on actions in 3 areas. First, addressing the fear of retaliation. Second, implementing the right action plan for cultural and structural transformation. And third, ensuring that the board and senior management can and will be held accountable for doing what's necessary to make the FDIC a safe and inclusive workplace. Currently, the agency is taking action on all three fronts, following through on recommendations in the report. More specifically, the FDIC is in the process of, first, replacing the broken internal process for fielding and responding to reports of harassment with a new structure that will bypass management hierarchies and utilize third-party investigators, hold wrongdoers accountable, and report directly to the board in order to credibly mitigate the risk of retaliation. Second, hiring a third-party expert to bring an independent outside perspective on what's needed to ensure cultural and structural transformation, including augmenting the agency's action plan as necessary. And third, hiring an independent transformation monitor to hold the agency accountable for following through on its commitments and taking the necessary actions in a timely manner. Protecting the people of the FDIC and earning back their trust must be our highest priority. I'm fully committed to that. The three actions I highlighted, restructuring how the agency does intake, investigations, and accountability, hiring a third-party expert, hiring an independent transformation monitor, are foundational to many of the recommendations in the report. Taking these steps cannot wait, and they must be done right. This is my focus as a director. Thank you. I'm happy to answer any questions.
We'll now recognize Mr. Joon Kim, partner of the law firm of Cleary Gottlieb.
Thank you. Chairman McHenry, Ranking Member Waters, members of the committee. My name is Joon Kim, and I'm a partner at the law firm of Cleary Gottlieb, Steen and Hamilton. And along with Jennifer Kennedy Park and Abena Mainoo, who is here with me today, the three of us led the recent review we conducted on behalf of the Special Review Committee of the FDIC's Board of Directors. The Special Review Committee appointed our firm to conduct an independent review of allegations of sexual harassment and interpersonal misconduct at the FDIC, including hostile, abusive, unprofessional, or inappropriate conduct, as well as management's response to these allegations, and the FDIC's workplace culture, including any practices that might discourage or deter the reporting of this type of misconduct. In conducting this review, we recognized its importance to the FDIC, an institution that performs a critically important public function of maintaining stability and public confidence in our nation's financial system. We appreciated the grave responsibility of conducting this type of a review, both to the FDIC and its employees, as well as the public that it serves. We understood that independence, credibility, and fairness were of paramount importance. And that is how we approached the conduct of our review and the drafting of our report. To gather the facts necessary for the review, we set up a hotline through which individuals could make reports. We obtained and reviewed thousands of documents from the FDIC and conducted additional interviews of current and former FDIC employees from across multiple offices, divisions, and seniority. The reports made to our hotline were particularly revealing, both in volume and in substance. Over 500 individuals courageously reported to our hotline, often painfully and emotionally recounting experiences of sexual harassment, discrimination, and other interpersonal misconduct that they had suffered at the FDIC. Although we cannot describe all of the incidents reported to us, we do feel compelled to convey the powerful emotions that we heard. Those who reported incidents to us expressed fear, sadness, and anger at what they had had to endure. Many had never reported their experiences to anyone before, while others had reported internally, had been left disappointed by the FDIC's response. Virtually all of them expressed hope that reporting what they had gone through to us might help change and make better the agency that they cared about deeply. In conducting our review, we were guided by their example and by the goal of doing right by them. We hope that our review and our report did justice to their experiences and honored the public service of the thousands of FDIC employees. My colleague, Ms. Mainoo, will discuss in her remarks the factual findings, analyses, and recommendations set forth in our report. We thank you for the opportunity to present on this important issue to this committee, and we welcome questions.
We'll now recognize for 5 minutes Ms. Mainoo.
Good morning, Chairman McHenry, Ranking Member Waters, and members of the committee. We set forth in our report the factual findings from our review, an analysis of the root causes of the issues we identified, and recommendations we believe would help address the issues that we identified. Our report is being submitted to the committee with our written testimony. As we set forth in our report, we found that for far too many employees and for far too long, the FDIC has failed to provide a workplace safe from sexual harassment, discrimination, and other interpersonal misconduct. We also found that a patriarchal, hierarchic, and insular culture helped create the conditions that allowed for such misconduct to occur and persist. In addition, we found that a deep-seated fear of retaliation, as well as a lack of clarity and credibility around internal reporting channels, led to an underreporting of workplace misconduct over the years. Other root causes we identified included a lack of accountability, insufficient prioritization of workplace culture, risk aversion, abuse of certain power dynamics, and insufficient record keeping. To address these issues, many of which we found were long-standing and deeply ingrained, we made a number of recommendations in our report. In developing the recommendations, we took into account the view expressed by many who reported to us that truly lasting and meaningful change will not be a matter merely of revisions to policies and increased trainings, although those are necessary and important, but must include real cultural and structural change. That is why, among other changes, we recommended the appointment of a culture and structure transformation monitor, as well as an independent third-party expert, such that the FDIC will have expert guidance in implementing the recommendations, as well as a monitor that will monitor and audit such implementation. First among our recommendations is to protect the victims, including protecting the physical and psychological safety of those who have experienced sexual harassment, discrimination, bullying, or other interpersonal misconduct at the FDIC. That was our first recommendation because they were our foremost concern. They are public servants who, like so many within the FDIC, care deeply about and take great pride in the mission and work of the FDIC. They demand and deserve a workplace with a positive culture that is safe from sexual harassment, discrimination, and other interpersonal misconduct. We hope our review and our report will help achieve that for them and all other FDIC employees. Thank you for the opportunity to present to the committee on this important matter, and we look forward to answering any questions you may have for us.
We'll now recognize Director McKernan for 5 minutes.
Chairman McHenry, Ranking Member Waters, others members of the committee, I'm here in my capacity as a co-chair of the Special Review Committee that oversaw Cleary Gottlieb's review of the FDIC's workplace. I might first address myself to the FDIC employees. Cleary's report establishes that you've been heard. The report makes clear that what happened to you was real, that what happened was wrong, totally unacceptable. I hope the report puts us on a path to change, and I hope accountability, real accountability, is not too far off. I'd like to also convey my respect and appreciation to Director Sue for the exceedingly constructive and nonpartisan way in which he approached this review. I think we set an example for how the FDIC board can and should work. In my year and a half at the FDIC, I've developed a strong attachment to the FDIC staff and our shared mission. Overseeing the review, I saw a different side of the FDIC. That was a jarring experience. I think that's similar to the experience many have reading the report. Cleary's report is a painful read. The report documents sexual harassment and misconduct on a scale and of nature that shocked the conscience. The report describes a good old boys club that is, quote, patriarchal and, quote, misogynistic. The report makes clear there has been a widespread, incredible fear of retaliation that deters victims from reporting wrongdoing. The report also makes clear that there has been a failure to hold wrongdoers accountable when actually reported. The report describes how these dynamics compound upon each other, driving a cycle of deepening fear and distrust among employees, especially women and other underrepresented groups. It is also the case that almost all the FDIC employees are good people, solid public servants, deeply committed to a mission that is central to the success of our country. Reconciling that with the Cleary report comes down to a question of leadership. An organization can prioritize protecting employees. It can strive to root out wrongdoers and make an example of them. Or an organization can prioritize protecting itself. It can strive to brush wrongdoers under the rug, move them around, even promote them, all with an aim to avoid the litigation, the bad press, the time and expense of disciplining bad actors. The FDIC too often chooses the second path. That choice isn't driven by policies, procedures, or training. That choice is driven by values, and our values are set by our leaders. Thank you, and I look forward to your questions.
Thank you. I now recognize myself for 5 minutes. Director McKernan, the chairman of the board of the FDIC is responsible for overseeing the staff of the agency. Is that correct?
Correct.
Do you think it's important that the chairman be able to have an open dialogue with FDIC employees about what they do?
Absolutely, Chairman.
Is that what all board members try to do?
I think so.
Would you agree that the findings of the Cleary report demonstrate that FDIC employees do not feel comfortable interacting with Chairman Grunberg?
The report certainly establishes that his reputation and conduct has chilled communication.
How so?
I think there's a general reluctance among some to deliver bad news. At least that's the findings of the report.
And how does delivering bad news, what does that mean for the agency?
Well, I think it can certainly impede our ability to achieve our mission. If we're going to achieve our mission, leadership needs to make informed decisions. To make informed decisions, you have to have all the facts, both good and bad.
Great. Does that affect safety and soundness?
Absolutely. If we can't, safety and soundness is central to our mission.
So rewinding to March of last year, when you had bad news about 3 banks going down, in the lead up to that, and you have a chair that has had such a serious chilling effect on his staff, they don't even want to present him bad information, that they fear for their career or just the nasty abuse that he will give them for presenting information.
I'm not sure if I understand the question, Chairman.
So did that have any effect in March?
It certainly could have. I don't know, of any specific incidents.
Okay. So the safety and soundness question here really falls on the chair of the FDIC board. Ms. Mainoo, I think you might be the appropriate person to ask this. Can you give us some details you learned during the course of your investigation about the chilling effect Chairman Grunberg's behavior has on FDIC employees delivering bad news?
Chairman McHenry, we described in our report, around page 90 of our report, incidents involving Chairman Grunberg. We had looked into allegations of interpersonal misconduct concerning Chairman Grunberg, as those were part of the publicly reported allegations that led to the need for our independent review. And specifically, we described incidents as recently as March 2023, in which an individual reported an outburst involving Chairman Grunberg.
And so what did you take from this? Was that a widespread thing, or was this a one-off occasion?
We obtained reports of several incidents over time, including when Mr. Grunberg was vice chairman of the FDIC, continuing till at least 2023 during his current tenure as chairman, where employees reported experiences with Chair Grunberg, including the chair losing his temper. And what we took from that and what we heard from employees who reported to us was that this could have a chilling impact on communications with Chair Grunberg, although I will also note that we did not identify specific incidents that affected the FDIC's ability to meet its mission.
Okay. So get into that question. So the chilling effect, you have stories. Does that establish the reputation he had among employees of the FDIC?
Yes, in the sense that the incidents contribute to the reputation that Chair Grunberg has for losing his temper.
Okay. And so when I asked this question about being presented tough information, bad news, there was nothing but bad news in the lead up to the bank failures in March of last year. And the specifics of that, this reputation he had for screaming, yelling, berating. And the report describes one incident where it's a period of something like 30 minutes that he was yelling at one employee. That would have an impact on their ability to actually tell him the bad news that was occurring in the financial system, which then could lead to a question of safety and soundness decision-making for the agencies. Clearly, from the outside, we saw the inability for them to make a decision, the FDIC to make a decision. Now, this reputation he has looks clearly connected with that inability. Director McKernan, knowing what we know now, do you think Chairman Grunberg should immediately step aside?
Chairman, my view is the FDIC urgently needs a fresh start, and the sooner the better.
And now yield back and recognize the ranking member, Ms. Waters, for 5 minutes.
Mr. Kim, the Cleary report addresses some serious issues that confront the FDIC. Yet the report does not provide any key information that is important to understanding the workplace culture at the FDIC and how to best correct the problems the report identified. For example, the report does not indicate how many of the 510 allegations are unique or even when these events occurred, other than that they occurred sometime between 1980s and this year. In fact, when discussing the allegations received through the hotline, the report states that, quote, because various individuals reported different types of misconduct that were sometimes overlapping or difficult to characterize, the numbers are estimates, end quote. Nor does the report indicate how many of the allegations were firsthand or secondhand. Given this lack of specificity, it is difficult to understand what types of misconduct may be increasing or declining over time and what types of misconduct are most prevalent today. Can you respond to that?
Yes, thank you. Our report reflects that 510 individuals reported into our hotline, and we provide at page 115 of our report a breakdown of the different categories of reports that came in by subject matter. Many of those reports came in anonymously or confidentially, where the person reporting specifically requested that their information be kept confidential.
How many of those reports were anonymous?
Pardon me?
How many?
How many
came in
were
anonymously?
Sorry, go ahead.
Can take that. We received 200 reports through the website that allowed for anonymous reporting. That said, even some of those reports contained contact information for the individuals. So 200 would be the high estimate.
We did include in the appendix to the report, it's approximately 50 pages, of 46 representative examples of reports that came in to our hotline. That provides quite a bit of detail, both dates.
Okay, let me be clear. What was the total number of reports? How
500.
many reports? What was the number of reports?
510 through the
500?
hotline.
And how many of those were anonymous?
Approximately 200.
About 200 of those, okay, all right.
And just to complete the thought, we did provide in the report representative examples of the types of allegations we received with detail, dates, and to the extent we did not include specificity, that was for the reason of protecting the confidentiality.
So how many do you consider you were able to validate?
The ways in which the ones that are identified in the appendix are corroborated or validated is set forth in the description in the appendix. It includes some reports that were consistent with other reports that others had made. Many of them, we do note in the report, many of the 510 are mere allegations. They are allegations that came into the report. We note that limitation in our report, but we also find in the report that the sheer volume and the nature of 510 reports coming in within a relatively short time of a hotline being opened with this type of these types of allegations.
So
is
how
in
many
itself
of
a
these
finding.
most often occurred at the headquarters, the regional offices or the field offices? Is that information identified in the report? I didn't remember seeing how many were actually headquartered field office or regional offices.
What we said in the report on page 115, which is the page that Mr. Kim had pointed to, is that many allegations came from regional or field offices. We received reports from all 6 regional offices. We received reports from over 30 of the field offices, and we also received reports from the FDIC's headquarters. One limitation in the information that was available to us goes to the record-keeping challenges that we had identified through our review. And so one of our recommendations is that the FDIC ensure more systematic record-keeping.
Thank you.
We'll now recognize the Vice Chair, Mr. Hill of Arkansas, for 5 minutes.
I thank the chairman, thank the panel for being with us today to continue our investigation of the poisonous culture at the FDIC. Ms. Mainoo, the Gottlieb report outlines that employees don't have trust in the reporting process, even though the FDIC has over 5 offices for employees to take their reports. This leads to employees feeling like the process is broken, confusing, ineffective, and to some degree, there's no real incentive to report when people are being browbeat and that word passes down through the culture. Can you describe some of the difficulties with that reporting channel to follow up on the line of questioning in your review?
Yes, Congressman. We described in our review, in our report, what we found in our review regarding concerns about the reporting processes and investigation processes. One question that FDIC employees have when they experience interpersonal misconduct is whether that conduct even violates any of the FDIC's policies, and this is in part due to some confusion about the policies and insufficient training on the policies.
Let me stop you there, because you know the FDIC and the Comptroller of the Currency and the bank regulators impose a strict standard as a part of their examination of HR practices at the institutions they regulate since the 1990s. What's not clear about sexual harassment in the FDIC policy that makes it so challenging to figure out?
One question that comes up is whether conduct that does not necessarily violate the law, but otherwise would count as harassment within the FDIC's policies, does violate any policies. So there's a misperception that in order for any conduct to violate the policies, it needs to rise to the level of unlawful conduct. Is
this a place where you'd want to work? Based on your spending weeks on this project, would you want to work in this environment?
I think that's a difficult question to answer in that, as we've all said in our statements, it's very clear, and we heard from the FDIC employees who reported to us how proud they are to work at the FDIC.
Excellent. It's an amazing mission since 1933, I agree. An important mission. but I don't believe that the current director should be in charge of cleaning up this situation. And I'm glad, according to the ranking member, that he's going to appoint, President Biden's going to appoint a new leader. But in the interim, for taking how long the confirmation process will take, it's my judgment that we should have the transition today, and that the current chairman should be out of his office in order to move this atmosphere forward. Mr. McKernan, let me turn and talk about the implications of this. We have a softening economy. We have a rising set of challenges in commercial real estate lending. We have the sharpest increase in interest rates since 1980, which has created some real pressure in our depository institutions. And I'm concerned that we don't have the right leadership to get the basic job done at the FDIC. What is your assessment of that? This committee heard testimony during Silicon Valley. It was not impressive what we heard from the FDIC. And in fact, you sent us a memo pointing out the significant managerial weaknesses.
Yeah, Congressman, what I would say to that is the state of affairs, the FDIC is challenging. Morale is bad. We just fell, I think, second to last in our group in our federal employment surveys. We were near the top for quite some time. I think it's fair to say that a lot of staff have lost confidence in leadership and even the board. I think it's fair to say that staff have seen no real accountability, so it's hard to see much commitment to change absent that accountability. I think it's fair to say that there's a lot of skepticism, even cynicism, about prospects at the FDIC. But I think it's also important to really emphasize that almost all the FDIC employees are good people. Like I said at the beginning, these are solid public servants, deeply committed to the mission, despite everything that we have going on. And they're going to keep pushing to do the mission. I think it's the job of the leadership to make sure that they can do their job. Frankly,
I agree. Let me reclaim my time in closing and simply say, you're right. We've got to have the best morale, the best esprit de corps, the best talent in the FDIC to handle their jobs. But I don't believe that's being done. I believe change needs to happen immediately. Yield back.
And this will be the final questioning before we go to floor votes, and we'll recess after Ms. Velasquez. Ms. Velasquez,
Thank you.
from New York is recognized for 5 minutes.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Mr. Kim, Ms. Mainoo, can you tell us how far back these issues date and why employees didn't feel comfortable reporting them earlier?
As we explain in our report, these issues are longstanding. As Mr. Kim noted earlier, we included in our report about 50 representative examples of the types of allegations that we learned, and we provided detailed descriptions. And even among those representative examples, you have some allegations going back as far back as the late 1980s and going on.
Okay, thanks. And do these reports become greater over time or less towards today?
It's difficult to speak to any patterns in terms of interpersonal misconduct identified at the FDIC. As we laid out in our report, the human resources group that receives and currently investigates allegations of interpersonal misconduct did not have a systematic way of keeping records of those types of allegations until about last year.
Thank you. And so, Acting Comptroller Sue, while this incident certainly did occur on Chair Grunsberg's watch, they also occurred under the chairmanship of Jelena McWilliams. Is that correct?
That's my understanding, yes.
Mr. Kim and Ms. Mainoo, your report states that over 500 people who reported allegations of misconduct are disproportionately women and people from underrepresented groups. Can you both speak to the type of incidents FDIC employees from this group face and how the good old boys culture enabled these events to occur without repercussion?
I can start. Yeah, we do make the finding that those who reported were predominantly women and from underrepresented groups. We noted that when we also noted that We also spoke to many people who had positive experiences at the FDIC. And in fact, some of the people who did report incidents generally had positive experiences themselves. But it was important for us to note that predominantly those reporting these issues were those who appeared to be women or underrepresented minorities.
So can you talk about the Good Old Boy Network?
Yes, we received reports about favoritism. For example, one of the examples that we included in the appendix with the representative examples talked about, and it was reported by two individuals where they observed they observed a manager acting inappropriately toward an employee in the presence of an executive. And in that situation, the executive asked the employee who had been yelled at and had been the subject of the abuse to apologize and did not say anything to the manager. And one of the people who reported to us observed that this was based on the personal relationship that the executive had with that manager, and to that individual was an example of the Good Old Boys Network.
So how do we break up this culture?
Cultural and structural transformation, we think, are important because, as we've explained, these issues are longstanding. There have been previous efforts to bring about culture change at the FDIC. We believe that in part because these issues have continued to persist, that those efforts have been ineffective. And so our recommendations, including the appointment of a monitor to oversee the FDIC's work going forward, are intended to bring about change.
Thank you. So the FDIC created an action plan that you are all aware. Can you speak to the viability of the plan and whether you think the plan alone is sufficient to address the structural and cultural changes?
As we noted in the report, the action plan does contain proposed actions that are overlap with our recommendations. And so obviously both were seeking to address a similar or same issue. However, we had some additional recommendations that we believed were important. As Ms. Mainoo mentioned, very important to us was an appointment of a transformation monitor who could monitor and audit the steps that were being taken, and that this person be, or the monitor be independent and have the necessary resources. Also, we recommended the retention of an external expert who is expert in these areas. And then importantly, we had a recommendation that the review process be conducted by a group that is independent.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
The ladies' time's expired. We'll now recess for floor votes, and we'll restart with Mr. Lucas when we return. The committee stands in recess. Committee will come to order. We're going to return to our questioning order. Thank you for the panelists for remaining. We'll now recognize the gentleman from Oklahoma, the Chair of the Science Committee, Mr. Lucas, for 5 minutes.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman, and I appreciate you yielding to me for questions. You know, in my tenure in Congress, on a variety of committees, we've dealt with a number of sticky sort of questions, things that had to be addressed, things that could not be allowed to go unchallenged. And I occasionally take a little different perspective sometimes in the questions I ask. So I would start by addressing Mr. Kim. On December 11, 2023, the FDIC Special Review Committee chose your firm to conduct an independent review of the FDIC's culture into allegations of sexual harassment, misconduct, just toxic culture at FDIC. You and your colleagues, Ms. Mainoo and Ms. Park, led the team for this investigation. Has your team conducted investigations into workplace misconduct before?
Yes, we have.
Mr. Kim, when the Special Review Committee chose your firm, what was your understanding of the scope of the investigation with respect to the conduct of the chairman?
The scope of our review was set forth to us in the resolution from the board, and that was for us to conduct an independent review of allegations of sexual harassment and interpersonal misconduct at the FDIC, including hostile, abusive, unprofessional, or inappropriate conduct, as well as management's response to these allegations, and the FDIC's workplace culture, including any practices that might discourage or deter the reporting of this type of misconduct. That was the scope that was provided.
So that we may better understand your investigation, could you elaborate on the steps your firm took to ensure independence of the investigation, to safeguard the report against any bias?
Yes, we obviously, as lawyers, have ethical obligations to our client. In this case, our client was the Special Review Committee of the FDIC board. That was the exclusive ethical duty that we owed. The investigative team understood that, and we also, as a precautionary measure, created walls internally at the firm to keep separate out any lawyers who do banking work, and we conducted our review in a way that ensured that independence, but also independence within the firm, but also from within the FDIC, because there was a need for independence in that regard as well.
There are some who have been distressed about the focus on the current chairman rather than his predecessors. Mr. Kim, during the course of your investigation, if significant issues were uncovered regarding previous chairs that contributed to the toxic workplace at the FDIC, how would that have been included in the report?
Yeah, we did not intend to or focus on particular chairs or not. As we make clear in the report, the workplace culture issues were longstanding, that have spanned for many years across different chairs. We addressed the conduct of the current chairman because public reporting relating to his conduct and his reputation was already publicly reported by the time we were appointed, and what led to the need for an independent review as opposed to a review led by management, which was what was contemplated before. And for that reason, as well as the reason that he is the current chairman, and obviously, as many people reported to us, culture starts at the top, and also because it's relevant to the implementation of the recommendations that we deemed it appropriate and necessary to cover his conduct as well in the way we did in the report.
Continuing my line of thought, Mr. Kim, of course, as you're gathering all the information and determining what is relevant to the investigation, not every piece of data would be included in the final report. From your interviews with current and past employees, was there evidence of substantial misconduct, misbehavior like Mr. Grunberg's from the previous chairman that was left out of the report?
As you've noted, not everything that we learned is set forth in the report. That includes with respect to anyone, including the current chairman. What we included was what's relevant and necessary to understand our factual findings and to support our recommendation. That's what we included in the report.
One last question briefly, Mr. Kim. Would you expand on how Chairman Grunberg's leadership may be a challenge to the FDIC's cultural transformation that we all want?
We did not in the report, nor do we today, take a position on whether the current chairman should or should not stay as the chair of the FDIC. We believe that to be beyond the mandate of our review. We wanted to review and investigate the facts, set forth the facts that were necessary to understand our findings, and the facts that were necessary to support our recommendation. Those are the only facts.
Thank you,
Mr. Kim. I yield back, Mr. Chairman.
Gentleman's time has expired. With that, the gentleman from Massachusetts, Mr. Lynch, is recognized for 5 minutes.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I want to begin by just saying there's a certain element of disingenuousness in terms of the Republican position on abuse of women in the workplace. We hear much complain about it here with respect to a Democratic appointee, Mr. Grunberg, who's admitted that he's leaving the office. But yet, I just want to point this out. All my Republican colleagues are supporting, President Trump, former President Trump, who has got an atrocious and long record of poor treatment. Not only poor treatment, but
Mr. Chairman,
I'm speaking. This is my time. And remember, the relevance here is the next president will appoint the FDIC chair that we're questioning conduct of today. So this is about the fitness and the true and genuine concerns that my colleagues have with respect to what has happened here. Let's put aside for a minute the fact that he's a convicted felon on a deal with a porn star, that the
Mr. Chairman, that is not
potential
correct.
Time
That is
belongs
not-
to
that
the
is not
gentleman from
correct.
This is my time.
Madam Ranking Member, I have it.
This is
Hold
my
on.
time. This
Hold
is my
on.
time. A civil
Suspend.
conviction by a jury.
The gentleman will suspend, just a moment. We'll suspend the clock. So the gentleman cannot interrupt that way. And I would remind the gentleman from Massachusetts to direct his remarks to the chair.
Yes.
And you will have your time. With that, the clock may resume.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I respect that, and I appreciate that. And we're talking about someone who has been convicted by a jury in a civil court for sexual abuse. And then, I could have brought in a tape here of the Access Hollywood thing where he talked about how he, grabs women's genitals and kisses them, right off the bat, So I just want to rebalance this about what we're doing here today. And if we're truly concerned about the way women are treated in the workplace, there's real reason to question the genuineness of the criticism on my colleague's part. I do want to ask, though, I'm a former union president. Let's get to the workplace here. I'm a former union president. I was a union steward before I was a union president. In the workplace, if some of this stuff, which was totally unacceptable, and I totally agree with the factual basis of the record and the investigation, why was not Mr. Kim or Ms. Mainoo, why was not the union involved here? As a union steward, I would have been the first person in the workplace to know about that activity, and there would have been a duty of fair representation on my part as a union steward to go to bat for those women, for those employees that were being treated like that. What happened here? You did the investigation. What happened so this is a union workplace. The NTEU, National Treasury Employees Union, is the collective bargaining representative for these employees, I believe. So what happened? What happened there? Where was the breakdown there?
Thank you, Congressman. You're correct that the National Treasury Employees Union is the relevant union here. And as we explained in our report, we spoke to union representatives as part of our effort to understand the scope of issues relating to interpersonal misconduct at the FDIC. And In terms of the union's role, the union did have a role in providing support, both to employees.
How many grievances were filed? That would be the normal. If I'm the union steward, I would file a grievance every single time something like that happened. How many grievances were filed?
We know that grievances were filed along with complaints under the anti-harassment program and under the FDIC's equal employment opportunity policy.
Okay. And where did those grievances go? Was there a procedure where they could be addressed?
There was a 4-step process. And the first step was for any grievances to go to a supervisor, all the way up to the chair or the chair's designate.
How many were sustained? How many grievances were sustained, and how many? What action happened as a result of that?
What we say in our report is that insufficient disciplinary actions were taken in response to allegations of interpersonal misconduct. And one of the statistics we cite is from the FDIC's reports that it made to Congress, that out of 92 complaints that were made between 2015 and 2023 under the FDIC's anti-harassment policy, the most serious disciplinary action that was taken was suspensions, and that was in 2 instances.
Gentleman's time has expired.
Thank you for your indulgence, Mr. Chairman. I appreciate it. Thank you.
And Chair would also like to remind the members up here about what the hearing is supposed to be about, but also about Rule 17. Rules of decorum do require us to not impugn members, other members, the president, or we would include nominees in that. And with that, the gentleman from, and I will also note.
Will the gentleman yield?
I will not. I will also note that the folks may use their 5 minutes as they wish.
Parliamentary
And what is the
inquiry.
gentlewoman's parliamentary inquiry?
I want to be sure about what you are advising us. Are you advising us that we're not to make any statements about the president?
No.
Would you please clarify?
I would like us to adhere to Rule 17, which says that we should not mischaracterize members or current members of government or past members of government. That is it. So with the gentleman from Texas is recognized for 5 minutes.
Mr. Chairman, thank you very much. I'd like to delve into and take a little bit further approach, Mr. Sue and also Miss Mainoo. Thank you for your comments today. Both of you used the word several times, retaliation. Are you both lawyers?
Yes.
What is the federal law related to retaliation, at least in your opinion, that this whole agency, all the management and others should have been advised of? Because I've heard you twice say there's a concern about retaliation.
An example would be the anti-discrimination laws, which in addition to making discrimination based on protected classes unlawful, would also cover any retaliation against individuals who make complaints about discrimination.
Would that be the same as a whistleblower, or is a whistleblower a different type of status? In other words, if a person's allowed to give feedback, their name, the information, specific information, you know who they are, is that treated differently under the law than whistleblower? I think the answer is yes.
Could you just rephrase your question?
Yes, ma'am.
Make sure I understand
Yes,
it.
ma'am. And thank you. There is feedback that was provided within the agency. I don't know what that venue was, but we've heard about some 500. There were some 300 perhaps where they provided their name and direct information to where you get back to them. You've already said, yes, there would be federal law related to the protection of those people, at least as relates to someone retaliating against them.
Correct.
Is that the same or different law that generally would apply to whistleblowers? And did you have whistleblowers?
There are also specific whistleblower laws that protect individuals who report violations of law. So that's another example.
Okay, so now I've heard both of you mention retaliation. probably as at least in your mind, as a source of probably what is still there. What has taken place in relationship and who would be responsible for that observation and fixing where it dealt with retaliation in this FDIC agency?
To elaborate on the concern about retaliation, one concern that we heard was, in addition to confusion about whether any conduct violated FDIC policies and who to report to, there was also a concern about whether FDIC employees could trust the reporting channels.
Yes, ma'am. I want to go to who is responsible for directly taking that issue on with the knowledge that we've heard the current leadership is incapable of effectively managing the organization. Who is taking that issue on within the agency, notwithstanding what they should not be waiting for a new person to be approved by the United States Senate? Who is taking this issue of retaliation on right now and has been in the past year? Who? Name that title.
So, Congressman, I believe the full board needs to be engaged in
Well, the full board's great. Okay, now the board. All right, who? You represent the board.
I'm on the board. Yes.
What are you doing to make sure that retaliation is not alive and well and will not be tolerated? What are you doing then, sir?
So the fear of retaliation requires both cultural and structural transformation. There is currently a process that is broken, where employees
When will
of the
that be fixed, sir, since you're the responsible party?
The board is currently taking action to create a new structure.
When will that be fixed? And does that require a new head of agency to approve that?
It is being fixed as we speak. The board is currently
fixed.
It is being fixed currently.
Would
yes.
you please provide this committee, both Republicans and Democrats, an answer that when that has been fixed?
Yes.
Notwithstanding who the director is, it is the board. I sure appreciate your help and thank both of you very much. I just think that some of the things, going back to conversation about what needs to be fixed today, within a division of labor, there are certain things the new chairman would need to be responsible for, and there are also things that are current issues. And I appreciate your help, and thank you very much, Mr. Chairman. I yield back my
The
time.
gentleman's time has expired. With that, the gentleman from California, Mr. Sherman, is recognized for 5 minutes.
Thank you. We've got a problem since the 1980s. The reports I won't repeat just because they've been stated so often, but they show a horrendous picture. And now we are close to solve, well, I can't say solving, but to making this agency as good as it can be as far as its workplace culture. I want to commend the law firm for its report. I want to commend the Wall Street Journal for really forcing that report to be commissioned. And now we are so close. Greenberg is resigning. Biden is going to appoint a successor. And I want to call upon the administration to appoint a successor as soon as possible. But I want the Republican members of this committee to take the opportunity to demand that the Senate not engage in dilatory tactics to prevent that successor from being confirmed. A prompt hearing and then an up or down vote without any of the Senate tricks. Because I was one of those who asked for this hearing, but that was before Greenberg announced his retirement. The title of this hearing is about the toxic workplace culture at the FDIC. If the Senate unduly delays the confirmation, we need another hearing, Mr. Chairman, on the Senate's toxic culture of delay, which would be preventing us from dealing with the toxic culture at the FDIC. Now, some have argued that somehow Signature Bank and First Republic are a result of Greenberg's temperament. Mr. Yu, you were there. Did these banks fail because they had bad management and they failed to account for interest rate risk? Or did they fail because of Greenberg's personality?
Thank you for the question, Congressman. So the OCC does not regulate Silicon Valley Bank.
Yes, I'm asking you in your role as a member of the FDIC.
So the factors that led to the failures are well laid out in the reports that the FDIC has.
Do any of those reports say it's Greenberg's personality? Is that's not mentioned? And has anyone, you're on the FDIC, has anyone at the FDIC identified for you, I was going to bring this First Republic issue up or Signature Bank up, but I failed to bring it up because I was worried about the chairman's personality. Has anybody stepped forward then and said the personality stopped them from taking action?
No.
The National Treasurer Employees Union represents the FDIC employees. I wonder whether Mr. Hsu and Mr. McKernan can commit to working with NTEU as the FTC moves forward to improve its workforce culture. Mr. Hsu?
Yes.
Yes.
Good. I would point out that there are 6,600 employees that deserve a good workplace culture. But there are 330 million Americans that deserve good bank regulation. And if we see if Mr. Grunberg resigns before his successor is confirmed, the FDIC could be split 2-2. Mr. Hugh, if the FDIC was split 2-2 and we had another big crisis, Silicon Valley Bank 2, is it possible that the FDIC would split 2-2 as to what action to take if they only had 4 commissioners?
It's hard to speculate about that.
But there's a reason why you have an odd number of commissioners, correct? It's so that you're less likely to split 2-2.
I don't want to speculate about that.
Okay, well, I won't ask you to speculate, but last I checked, 2 + 2 was 4. If you have only 4 members, then it can divide 2-2. I'd finally point out that Silicon Valley Bank also failed because interest rate risk was not built into sufficiently our bank examination process, and we need to market all long-term instruments, debt instruments that banks hold, whether it is available for sale or held to maturity. And until we do that, we will see banks put too much of their money on Wall Street instruments. I yield back.
Gentleman's time has expired. The gentleman from Missouri, Mr. Lutkemeyer, the chair of the National Security Subcommittee.
That's a very long name, Mr. Chair.
Yes, I was truncating it in my own head, so sorry about that.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Thank all of you for being here today. This is a very serious matter that deserves a lot of insightfulness and a lot of, I think, insightful comments and questioning. So my first question is to Mr. Hsu this morning. Do you take this report seriously, Mr. Hsu?
Very seriously, yes.
Okay, you say in your written testimony that you are committed, and I quote, committed to holding any employee engaging in misconduct accountable. And your main objective is to protect the employees. You believe this?
Yes.
Why have you not taken action to fire Mr. Grunberg at this point?
The actions we're focused on are actions that I can influence, which relate to hiring a third-party expert.
You can't influence his continue to be at the head of this agency?
That decision is for the White House and for the Senate.
Can't the FDIC board do something about this?
I'm sorry?
Can't the FDIC board do something about this?
The FDIC board doesn't have authority.
What happens if Mr. Grunberg commits a felony or winds up in jail tomorrow? Who takes over?
I think under the rules, then the vice chair would.
We have a vice chairman. I'll be darned. Okay, Mr. McKernan, do you take this report seriously?
Absolutely.
In your testimony, you say that you hope accountability is not far off. Do you believe this?
Do I believe it's far off?
Yeah.
I'm not particularly optimistic we'll see accountability soon.
Okay. Yeah, I'm concerned about that part. You also say that reconciling your report comes down to a question of leadership. An organization can prioritize protecting employees, it can root out wrongdoers and make an example of them. but we need leaders. Why are you not taking action? Why are you not pressing for Mr. Grunberg to resign?
Well, I am pressing for the board to take a more active role. To your earlier question, I think there's a real question here that we at the board need to consider. During this interim, when we're waiting for a new chair, we're waiting for the current chair to resign and have the acting chair, I think the board needs to take a more active role here, and I have been pushing for that.
Well, I appreciate that, because I think you're talking a minute ago about having leaders and solving these problems. And your guys are in a position, Mr. McKernan, Mr. Sue, of being leaders in this situation. As leaders, you need to step up and stop the nonsense. Otherwise, you're an enabler. You continue to allow this to go on. You're no better than Mr. Grunberg, in my mind. If you allow it to go on, it's got to be stopped. Mr. Kim and Ms. Mainoo, is rape a crime? You both are attorneys. You tell me.
Yes, rape is a crime.
In your report, you indicate that at this hotel that a lot of the FDIC folks go to when they're in training, there was a rape that occurred, besides a bunch of, I think, 24 more instances of harassment of some kind. Was anybody prosecuted as a result of that?
I believe there was a rape that was alleged and presented to the local police department. I don't believe there was...
there was no follow-through on
that? Not that we're aware of.
So we have an alleged crime here that nobody took care of? Was it swept underneath the rug? I mean, this is a very serious crime. I mean, I don't understand how they can get away with this, personally. But you're telling me they swept it underneath the rug?
We're not aware that it was swept under the rug. What we are aware of is what the information that we were able to obtain from the local police department, and that there was
but it is a crime.
No action taken. Rape itself is a crime, of course.
Okay. So we're allowing criminal activities to go on within the agency, if that's the case.
Just to add to what Mr. Kim said, there were 2 reports of sexual assault at the Seidman Center. For one of those 2 sexual assaults reported, we understand from the FDIC's Office of Inspector General that no charges were filed because the claims could not be substantiated by law enforcement. And as to the second incident, we understand from the Office of Inspector General that the investigation into that incident is ongoing, so we were not able to get more information about it.
The intimidation of the director have anything to play in that, do you think? The intimidation of the chairman have anything to do with that not being taken out?
There's no indication that the chair related to this.
Very good. Well, Mr. Sue, you know, you took part in the coup that occurred with Ms. Williams over a major disagreement of opinion over a merger issue. Yet you've let this crime go unchallenged. Sexual harassment and racial discrimination, which is documented, continue to go unchallenged. I'm curious as to why we don't take further action. It just boggles my mind, but it's about politics, pure and simple, in my mind. You know, we have a Republican who's the vice chair. If Mr. Grunberg steps down, you've got a Republican in the chair, and it's all about that. It's not about what's good for the people of the FDIC. It's not what's good for the industry of the banking industry. It's about politics. And that's sad because both of you sit in a position to stop the nonsense.
Has expired.
Please do. With that, I yield back.
Gentleman's time has expired. The chair recognizes the gentleman from Texas, Mr. Green, for 5 minutes.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I thank the witnesses for appearing today. Permit me to ask a question about the composition of the board. Do you agree that the board has some 5 members, Mr. Kim?
The board of the FDIC?
Yes.
Yes.
And do you agree that, well, let me just ask you, how many women are among the 5?
There are no women among the 5.
5 men?
Correct.
I believe we live in a world where it's not enough for things to be right, they must also look right. By the way, no disrespect to any of my friends who are on the board. I think highly of you, but it just seems to me that it may be time for us to look to have the leadership of a female. Permit me to ask you about the comment that you made. I believe it was you, Mr. McKernan. You made the comment of this being misogynistic. Explain, please.
explain what I mean by that?
Yes, sir.
Well, this is a characterization of the report, and when they describe the workplace culture, Cleary may have other examples, but what I understand that to mean is that we have biases here slanted in favor of the male workforce.
You've heard the term good old boys.
Absolutely.
Is that what we're talking about?
That's right.
Someone used the term patriarchal. Would you speak up, ma'am? I believe you did.
I did use that term, and that referred to conduct including allegations that there are outdated notions of appropriate and inappropriate workplace behavior, as well as favoritism and exclusion of women, as well as members of underrepresented groups.
Mm-hmm. Now, ma'am, can you point to in your report where you indicate that a member of the board should be made chair of the board? Can you? If you cannot, you may say no.
Could you rephrase the question? I want to make sure I understand it.
Can you point to some language in your report where there's an indication that a member of the board should become chair of the board?
We do not take a position in our report about
So
who
you
should be in
cannot. Your
leadership.
report doesn't address that, because that's beyond your mandate.
It's beyond our mandate.
Absolutely, beyond your mandate, which means that you're not recommending that the vice chair become chair of the board, are you?
We're not taking any positions on who should be the chair.
So when you
of the
say
board.
this should be done expeditiously, you're not indicating that it must be done expeditiously so that the vice chair can become chair, are you?
We are suggesting that our recommendations should be implemented expeditiously to improve the workplace culture at the FDIC.
Exactly, but not such that a specific person can become chair.
We're not taking any position
No
on who should be
position on
chair.
chair.
Correct.
In this toxic environment, with 5 men at the helm, can you find a reason why a woman should not become the next chair? In your report?
Absolutely not.
It just seems to me that the president is trying as best as he can to do what someone said about a fresh start. Who made that statement? Raise your hand if you said fresh start.
Congressman, I believe that was me.
Yes, a fresh start. A fresh start, in my opinion, should include bringing a woman, placing a woman at the helm, woman chair. Now, this can be difficult for my colleagues across the aisle to embrace because we quite regularly have all men on our panels, and quite regularly I remind them. Quite often the reason we have females is because the Democrats will decide that we need to have some balance. But it's just not unusual to have all white men. This is not getting a field of where we are, it's the mentality. And this mentality is pervasive not only on this board, this FDIC, but this is something that we've got to deal with across many, many lines. So I want to go on record as supporting a female as the next chair of the board. I think it's time to do that. I yield back.
Gentleman's time has expired. The chair will now recognize himself for 5 minutes. Ms. Mainoo, I have a question for you. Just been kind of hearing between the lines from a lot of my colleagues on the other side about, seems like they seem to think your report was somehow incomplete. Was it incomplete?
No, our report,
Was it biased?
it was not biased.
Was it sensationalized?
It was not sensationalized.
So you believe it's an accurate reflection of the leadership and the culture of what was happening at the FDIC?
We do.
Okay. I will note, by the way, that we had a woman chair of the FDIC. The last chair of the FDIC, Mr. Sue, helped remove her. When it comes to equity, we had that. So I do want to say as well about the report, Ms. Mainoo or Mr. Kim, number of the allegations seem to be sort of saying, well, only there was a focus on one particular chair, the current chair. My reading of the report is that former chairs, 2 women, by the way, were only mentioned in the report for the work that they did attempting to improve the agency culture. Is that accurate?
We make very clear in the report that the workplace culture and conduct issues were longstanding.
They were longstanding, and
pervasive.
who was attempting to fix it?
All chairs have taken steps
Okay.
to seek to address
Okay.
them. We reached
I understand your delicate position, Mr. Kim, but the simple fact is that you had an open-ended report. There was not problems with the other 2 female chairs. There was a problem with this chair. So I'm going to move on. A few weeks ago, the FDIC report, a board of directors terminated the Special Review Committee, leaving an agency to handle matters of the independent review internally. The board of directors of the FDIC is supposed to set policy, oversee management, and protect the interests of employees. Director McKernan, what is the role of the board in the day-to-day operations of the FDIC? You were starting to say you were advocating for that.
Yeah, when we terminated the Special Review Committee, I was of the view that we really need to have the board step up and take a more active role during this interim. One way to do that would be to establish a board committee, only independent directors, not represented management directors, to oversee implementation of the action plan.
Sorry, if Chairman Grunberg didn't see the cultural problems at the agency for 10 of his 13 years as chairman, shouldn't the board be playing a bigger role in overseeing that cultural change?
That is my view.
Okay. What specifically can the board do?
One option would be to establish a board committee.
Okay, but that appears to be rejected by Mr. Sue. Mr. Sue, is that correct?
I believe the full board needs to be fully engaged in order to back the actions so that the actions that are taken to fulfill the recommendations are long-lasting, they're taken now, they're conducted in full.
All right. So based on the whistleblower reports both before and after the report, Chairman Grunberg has not been protecting FDIC employees. They don't have confidence in him. In fact, I think there was a Wall Street Journal article that literally the title was, "He survived a beatdown from Congress, but can he survive one from his own staff?" Director Sue, do you still believe, as you testified in May, Chairman Grunberg can restore trust at the FDIC and lead changes in the culture during the remainder of his time? And as I said in my opening, is he the right man, the right time, with the right ideas?
My focus is on the employees of the FDIC and
Is he
delivering on the
right
action.
person to lead this?
So long as the chairman is delivering on commitments and taking actions, I'm supportive. It's
I'm
conditional
taking
on
that as a
taking
yes.
those actions.
I'm taking that as a yes.
It's conditional on taking those actions.
Okay. So that's a conditional yes. I'm just not sure why you're so afraid of him, quite honestly, and why you can't admit an obvious truth. That is disappointing because I know, and I believe you know, that the FDIC employees would disagree with you, that he is not the right person to be leading this. So, Director Sue, I think it's finally time to become more active director. I think that your time and certainly your efforts in removing the last female chair of the FDIC for what many of us believe was certainly far less than anything that is being accused or is being alleged right now. It's hard to view that as not for political purposes. And I'd say it's time for you to step up and for you to be able to change that. Let's do what's good for the employees.
I have been completely focused on trying to establish 3 actions that are critical to reestablishing trust with the employees of the FDIC.
My time is expiring, but you also need to remove the chairman. And with that, I yield back. With that, the gentlelady from Ohio, Ms. Beatty, who is also the ranking member of the Subcommittee on National Security, is now recognized for 5 minutes.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Thank you, Ranking Member. Let me just start by reminding my Republican colleagues that the hearing on Director Grunberg was our last hearing, where Democrats were very critical of him, as well as Jelena McWilliams, for failing to address the long-span culture of abuse. Republicans continue to point blame on Mr. Grunberg. Well, he has resigned. And I applaud President Biden for putting a critical eye on identifying a person with the experience, background, and a person who has been tested and supported by Democrat and Republicans to be confirmed. And the next potential FDIC chair that I think we're expecting to be nominated meets all of those standards, and as we have heard before from our ranking member and others, Christy Goldsmith Romero. Again, she meets all of those standards. If Republicans care about the organization, the people, and moving forward, then they would follow Democrats and put people over politics. I think that, there's a lot of hypocrisy, in my opinion, Mr. Chairman, here of Republicans being outraged by sexual harassment, misconduct in this context, but not in other contexts. My senior Republican colleague from Missouri asked the question about rape, and if rape was a crime, and it was answered by our expert witness as yes. But I don't see, Mr. Chairman, Republicans calling for the resignation or removal of your last party leader for the exact same conduct that Trump had, hypocrisy. Now, I think it's very interesting that you asked the witness, or you stated that he was afraid of the director. So let me say to my Republican colleagues, why are you so afraid of Trump? If it's in alignment to say that he's afraid of someone that he had to work for, and Trump has done many of these same things, and I'm within Rule 17, which I just took the last 20 minutes to read, Mr. Chairman, as much as anybody else over there has said and talked about President Biden. So I think it's interesting. I did not hear you answer the question if you are afraid or ever felt afraid. I'm going to extend it. Have you ever felt threatened or afraid of the chair?
No.
And to your Republican, have you ever felt threatened or afraid of the chairman?
No, Congresswoman.
Okay, thank you. Now, let me go to another question. I want to thank my colleague, Mr. Green, who talked about having a female, and I'm sure he was speaking in the spirit of diversity and inclusion. To the acting comptroller, either one, my Democrat and Republican, I'd like to start with you to understand the diversity and inclusion efforts at the FDIC. Staff diversity at this prudential regulatory agency, I believe, continues to lag. It's clear that it's not just diversity, but it's also inclusion, and it must be improved, I believe, within your agency. So not only women, but people of color. I think it's important when you talk about the culture that people come from, whether it's rural America, whether it's suburban. So it's not just race and gender. It's far more than that. What steps could you tell us that the FDIC is taking to do that, and especially at the GS-15 level? And we only have about 30 seconds. I'm going to give you each 10. And if you don't know, say you don't know.
So I believe the action steps that are laid out in the agency's action plan, as well as the recommendations that are there in the report, will go a long way to creating the environment that will enable.
So you think there's enough in the report that will address it?
It's a starting point.
Okay. To your colleague.
Congresswoman, I agree. I certainly support your point here around the need to really foster more diversity and inclusion at the agency. And I think we have a good program in place currently to both recruit and retain. Retain is a really key point.
I only have 2 seconds, so you can give me a written answer. Are there 2 top recommendations that you would give that would be the most? My time is up, so you can submit.
The gentlelady will take that in writing, as she had indicated. With that, gentleman from Kentucky, Mr. Barr, is recognized for 5 minutes.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. As you all know, on May 20th, Chairman Gruenberg announced that he would resign after the Biden administration nominates and the Senate confirms his new successor. Given the culture and the toxic workplace environment, that's a very swamp-like thing to do. This is why the American people hate Washington, D.C., because it's not a resignation. Resignation should have come months ago, but instead it's not a resignation. And in fact, according to a Wall Street Journal article, Gruenberg himself suggested he's staying because if he leaves, the agency will have 2 Democrats and 2 Republicans. This is supposed to be an independent regulatory agency, not a partisan agency. But Gruenberg is saying the reason he's not resigning is because, oh my gosh, it's no longer going to be a partisan majority. That means he's more concerned about threats to the Biden administration's partisan regulatory agenda than he is about cleaning up the mess he created. Mr. Su, do you believe that you have a responsibility as an FDIC board member to protect the independence and credibility of the FDIC as an institution, not the partisan makeup of the FDIC?
The independence of the FDIC is critical. Just as critical is taking actions to protect the employees of the FDIC.
Yeah, and so resigning now is how you protect the employees of the agency, not after the Biden administration can protect its partisan majority. Let me ask you this, Director McKernan. Have you heard from employees at the FDIC following Chairman Gruenberg's announcement that he would retire later instead of now?
Have I heard from them? Yes.
And tell me, what have they told you? Are they able to carry out their work without distraction?
I would say the universal view, there's a lot of views about the report, but universally you're exhausted and distracted.
Are employees able to effectively do their jobs?
I think it's a significant headwind.
In your opinion, how does the failure of Gruenberg to resign today, how does that prevent the FDIC from meeting its responsibilities as an independent federal regulator?
Congressman, as I've said, we need a fresh start sooner rather than later. That's important to establish credibility. It's important to bring in someone that has the moral authority to really push change. And it's important that we have clean hands to sort of deal with our legacy issues.
I'll stick with you, Director McKernan. Last month, the FDIC announced that there are 63 banks at the brink of insolvency in the United States. The commercial real estate office situation is a problem. I don't think it's systemic, but I think the FDIC is going to have a lot of important work to do with distressed banks that are overexposed to commercial real estate in a high interest rate environment over the next several years. Resolution of those institutions is going to be important for the stability of our financial system. In your judgment, is the safety and soundness of our system threatened with this distraction of Chairman Gruenberg hanging on to power? And can he manage these risks that are coming at us like a freight train?
The distraction certainly does not help. That's why I say we need a fresh start.
Well, I think that's really important. That's the important point here. It's important to change the culture and clean up the toxic culture there and get morale and retention of examiners and recruiting of new examiners to do that. But the job at the FDIC over the next couple of years, when we have a wave of defaults in commercial real estate and some of these banks that are overexposed, the FDIC's got a big job ahead of it. And every day that goes on that Gruenberg is there jeopardizes the safety and soundness of our financial system. The FDIC needs to be on the ball right now. And I'll finish with Comptroller Su. On May 15th, when you last appeared with us, appeared with Mr. Gruenberg, Mr. Meeks asked you whether you thought that the chairman could restore trust and credibility at the FDIC. You testified that you thought he could, and then you answered Mr. Heising based on certain conditions. I asked you, given his history of hostile behavior, you passed it off as passion, just passion, but you finally admitted the issues are severe. Recall the independent report that you oversaw with Director McKernan. Is it still your testimony that you believe Chairman Gruenberg can restore trust and credibility at the FDIC?
I believe we need to take action right now with regards to changing the structure of the agency, getting a third-party expert, and hiring an independent monitor.
Yeah, so do you agree or disagree with the findings of the report that you oversaw?
I agree with all the findings of the report.
Okay, well, why shouldn't Gruenberg step down immediately?
My focus is on the action.
Well, your focus should be on the leadership that has caused the problem, and he needs to resign now. I yield.
Gentleman's time has expired. With that gentleman from Illinois, Mr. Foster will be recognized, but I do want to remind my colleagues, I will do this periodically, that under Rule 17, members, the president, and the presumptive nominee of both parties for president are protected. Members will refrain from engaging in personalities. In other words, if it's about policy and legislation, it's fine. With that, Mr. Foster, you're recognized for 5 minutes.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. And I have to say that I concur, and I look forward to my Republican colleagues encouraging their Senate colleagues to rapidly confirm the replacement for Mr. Grunberg. I speak for many members of this committee when I say that I was appalled by the findings of the Cleary report. It painted a picture of an agency plagued by toxic culture that has allowed inappropriate workplace conduct to persist for far too long without accountability, and it is appropriate to bring in new leadership to the FDIC that is a demonstrated commitment to addressing these issues and the credibility to instill positive change at an agency that's long struggled with these issues that we're discussing today. I encourage the Biden administration to quickly nominate a new FDIC chair, which I understand is underway, and for the Senate to confirm them without delay. From my experience as a business owner and as an organization leader, I know that culture starts at the top. Many current and former FDIC employees bravely shared their stories for this report, and it's important that swift action be taken to show them that their voices have been heard. The action plan that was put forward last December and the recommendations in the Cleary report are important steps, and I encourage future FDIC leaders to dutifully implement those recommendations and the other changes that may prove to be necessary. But I'd be interested in what timescale we can expect for these changes. I'll start with this. So Acting Controller Sue and Mr. McKernan, as directors of the FDIC, you've experienced the fact that data on misconduct throughout the organization has not been collected regularly or uniformly. So my question is, has this been fixed? It has not been regularly provided, apparently, even to directors and senior management. This issue was highlighted in both the Inspector General's 2020 evaluation and the Cleary report. So first, do you believe this was an impediment to your understanding the full scope of what has been going on? And secondly, is that part at least fixed today? If there is a complaint that comes in today, is it being logged in a systematic manner? I'll start with Acting Controller Sue.
Thank you very much for the question. So I think has been highlighted previously, record-keeping challenges at the agency have been an impediment to having the proper culture and the structure to be able to deal with these issues. That is one of the recommendations. It has to be pursued. There are some predicates before we can get to that, though. There needs to be a third-party expert, there needs to be an independent monitor, and there needs to be a safe reporting channel for all employees in order to get those foundations, so then that record keeping can be addressed in due time, so that all these recommendations have to be implemented in full. We're going to do that as quickly as possible.
Yeah, but is there anything in the interim? Is there any improvements that have been made in the record reporting and keeping? Has at least a memo gone out to everyone? Hey, do something better than you've been doing, so that whoever comes in to finish cleaning up the situation will say, here is a comprehensive list of everything, every complaint that's been received for the last 6 months or whatever.
Yeah, I believe that in the agency's action plan, there are sub-action plans within that. Those have been assigned, there are sponsors, there are deadlines. I believe that record keeping has been part of that. Well, I don't know if Director McKernan has other.
Yeah. No, I think I concur with that. The only thing I might add here is that even if we have the most ideal reporting mechanism and record keeping mechanism in place, where it's not going to work if people are afraid of retaliation. Yep. And that changes, that's not policies, procedures, training, that's a change in values. And that's going to be something that is going to have to be like a cycle that builds. We're going to have to show that through discipline and by championing people who do it well.
And reporters, people that are thinking of reporting something, will look at whether other people that report them actually get their complaints addressed or whether they're swept under the rug. And so it's going to be the work of years to let everyone understand that it's an organization that takes these complaints seriously. And so can you give me some idea of the time scale? When should we really expect measurable changes in the organization, assuming that all of these are implemented?
So your point about trust is really critical. There is a reason that FDIC employees have been skeptical of these efforts in the past, And that trust is going to be established through consistent actions over time that show that it protects them. In this process that we established for the hotline that Cleary ran, there was skepticism about using the hotline for some time. It took time for brave employees to come forward and use it and realize, okay, this is different. I can trust this. They could tell their colleagues. And those hotline calls, the hotline usage improved over time because people trusted it. We need to do the same as an agency. That's why it's so critical that we stand up these new structures immediately with urgency, that they're credible and that people don't have that fear of retaliation.
Yeah. And so we have to monitor that as,
Yes.
as the
Gentleman's
pipeline
time has
moves.
expired.
Thank you. I yield back.
And with that, the gentleman from Texas, the skipper of the Republican baseball team, which we have a big game tonight, is recognized. Mr. Williams is recognized for 5 minutes.
You're going to do well tonight. Thank you for that introduction. Director McKernan, last November, after the Wall Street Journal published the first article about the FDIC's culture, Chairman Gruenberg announced that he made the decision to hire Baker Hostetler to conduct a top-to-bottom assessment of workplace culture issues at the FDIC that same day. When the second Wall Street Journal article came out detailing Chairman Gruenberg's misconduct, the FDIC Board of Directors instead created a special review committee and appointed you and Director Sue as its co-chairs. So, Director McKernan, did Chairman Gruenberg participate in any decisions made by the special review committee?
No.
Why didn't he participate?
I think it's important for the independence of the process that this be a process overseen entirely by independent directors.
Okay. Chairman Gruenberg was excluded from the special review committee and was removed from the creation of the action plan because he is part of the problem at the FDIC. Now, through our committee's investigation and the Cleary report, we've seen multiple instances of bullying and misconduct from the chairman himself. If he wasn't fit to be part of these initial process or culture changes, wouldn't you agree that there is a concern that he is not properly leading the implementation of the action plan and clearly Gottlieb's recommendations?
Congressman, I think it's an important point. Like I've said, I've been advocating for the board to take a more active role for these and related considerations. I think there's a question here about what's the right governance of our action plan going forward.
So it's appalling to me that he would even consider attempting to be part of the solution when he's part of the problem. So, Mr. Kim, one of Cleary's recommendations is for the FDIC to hold leadership accountable. So can you talk about why this recommendation is necessary at all levels for a true cultural change at the agency?
We've set forth in the report our finding that these workplace conduct and culture issues have been longstanding and persistent. And as a result, we believed that the recommendation needed to include transformation of culture and structure beyond just improved trainings or policies. And as a result, that was our recommendation. Our recommendation is that the organization, including its leaders and managers, need to recognize the need for this transformation, cultural and structural. We did not take and do not take a view as to whether any particular leader or chair should or should not remain at this FDIC. Was not in our mandate, nor do we believe we had the authority to make such a decision or recommendation.
On May 20th, Chairman Gruenberg said that he would resign from his role as chairman after President Biden and the Senate have nominated and confirmed his new successor. We've been talking about that today. So this is unacceptable and a clear political decision by the Biden administration and Chairman Gruenberg. Cleary's report has shown that the employees of the FDIC have zero faith, zero, I repeat, in their current chairman. And Chairman Gruenberg's decision is insulting to those who his actions have directly affected. So, Director McKernan, how does this hinder the FDIC from fulfilling its duties, and what particular challenges does this create for the FDIC in effectively overseeing and managing financial institutions?
Congressman, the morale at the FDIC is bad. That's not good for our ability to execute on the mission. We have great staff. They're going to keep pushing forward, but we shouldn't create headwinds to that. I think also going forward, longer term, the state of affairs at the FDIC, if not fixed, are going to be a real problem for retention and recruitment of new staff, and that will be fatal to our ability to achieve our mission if we can't fix that.
I'm a small business owner, and I know if your employees don't have faith in leadership or trust in, it's not ever going to work. And you got a real issue here. With that, I have a minute to go, Mr. Chairman. I yield my time back to you if you'd like it.
Well, I appreciate that. And Mr. McKernan, we were starting to explore some of those changes. And do you believe, I'll ask you the same question I asked Mr. Sue, which is, do you believe that Mr. Grunberg is the right man at the right time with the right ideas to be able to lead the FDIC into a new place?
As I said, I think we really need a fresh start and sooner rather than later.
And does that mean waiting until, it feels like a little like saying I'm resigning, but I'm actually not resigning, is a little like a member of Congress saying, well, I'm not going to serve in Congress if the people who elect me don't elect me. Well, of course, that's there's a simple thing that this president could do, which is remove Mr. Grunberg, and we could start on that fresh start, could we not?
I take your point. I do think it is really ultimately a question for our elected leaders, but if I'm asked, my focus is on what's on the best interest of the agency, and I think that's clear.
All right. Time has expired. Gentleman's time from Texas has expired. With that, the gentleman from California, Mr. Vargas, is recognized for 5 minutes.
Thank you very much, Mr. Chair. First of all, I want to thank the chair. We did ask for a hearing, and he provided one, so I want to thank the chair and the ranking member so we could ask these questions. I appreciate it very much. At the beginning, Mr. Speaker, actually, you said culture starts at the top. I agree with that. Culture starts at the top. And Mr. McKernan, you said values are set by our leaders. I think that that's correct. I take a look here at Rule 17 under decorum and debate, and it says members shall be confined to questions under debate, avoiding personality. It doesn't say that you can't talk about convictions, that you can't talk about court cases. In fact, you can. I don't see why you cannot. I think that that allows for it, Mr. Speaker.
Well, I appreciate the upgrade, but it's Mr. Chairman. But
Mr. Chairman.
Mr. Speaker, and I'm happy to address that. There was no discussion of saying.
Right. No. The reason I say that is because, another member said that this is one of the reasons that people hate Congress is because of the swampy move, Mr. Greenberg. Now, by the way, my dad, great guy, unfortunately passed away a few weeks before I joined Congress, taught me one thing. He says, never defend son the indefensible. So I'm not going to defend Chairman Grunberg because I think it's indefensible personally. I'm not going to defend him. But I will defend, obviously, the decisions that we're making here. And how do you defend others when you're talking about culture starts at the top? And then you say that people hate Washington because we're swampy. No, it's because we're hypocrites. Because we're hypocrites. When you say that culture starts at the top and you take a look at who's at the very top, and you take a look at convictions, you take a look at court cases, and then you say, that's fine, we're going to look away, that's fine. But this chairman, we're going to hold accountable. No, hold both accountable. I think we ought to, I don't think Chairman Grunberg, by the way, I don't think he should be there personally either. But, the hypocrisy that I hear on the other side really is stunning, just stunning on this issue because of the court cases. And it's not my, it's not my decision, the decisions of jurors and judges that made those decisions. All that being said, I do think that there's a problem here, and obviously we had, and I thank the work that you've done as attorneys, and I thank the work that you've done as board members. I think you've worked hard. Now, we did have, obviously, recommendations that were made in 2020, and they weren't fulfilled. I mean, those recommendations, why do we think that this time, because again, we talk about people afraid of retaliation, why do we think it's going to work this time? Mr. Kim, I think I'll go to you because you're the one that head up the investigation. Go ahead, sir.
Yeah, we did find that a number of the findings in the 2020 OIG report remained issues, and that is partly what led us to the finding that these are issues that have been longstanding, are deep-seated, which is why, based on the findings, we wanted to put in the report sufficient information so that the reader can get a flavor of what it is that we heard. And we did hear on a regular basis the fear of retaliation.
And it was your testimony, I believe, that a lot of the people that came forward were women and underrepresented minorities. Is that your testimony continues?
That's correct.
Okay, and why do you think that that is the case?
Because I think women and underrepresented minorities have been at the FDIC and elsewhere more susceptible to misconduct, as well as victims of a culture that is patriarchal or insular.
Sort of the good old boys that was spoken about at the beginning?
That is what we heard.
And most of it was in the offices away from the Capitol, not from the Capitol, but from Washington?
It was both. As we set forth in the report, we received reports from all of the divisions, all of the districts. But as we note in the report, some of the issues with respect to fiefdoms and the like was more prevalent in the field offices than in headquarters.
Okay, well, again, I have 30 seconds left. I want to thank you for your work. I do think we should move forward. I don't think that it's defensible to defend Chairman Grunberg. I don't. And I think that the things that were said at the beginning were absolutely true. Culture starts at the top, so does character. And I think we need to change there, and I wish that my colleagues on the other side would listen to their own words. Thank you very much. I yield back.
Gentleman yields back. Gentleman from Ohio, Mr. Davidson, Chair of our Housing and Insurance Subcommittee, is recognized for 5 minutes.
Thank you, Chairman. Thank you for our witnesses, Mr. McKernan. I thank you for the work to highlight some of these issues. In your opinion, can an effective top-to-bottom cultural change be made at FDIC while Martin Grunberg is chairman?
I don't think we can have real culture change until we have that fresh start.
That's been my experience, whether it was in the military or in business, frankly here. You can update the HR manual, you can write new standard operating procedures, you can train them all you want. Sometimes you just got to change the people. And it seems clear that we need to do that. Why is the delay? Director Sue, why the delay? Why should we tolerate Grunberg sticking around through the rest of the afternoon?
So at the board, we're not delaying. We've taken steps already to hire a independent third-party expert, an independent monitor, and to restructure the reporting lines for incidents. So those are all actions that are required to reduce the fear of retaliation, to ensure that we've got the right outside expertise so we can make the changes that are necessary.
So you're outsourcing the leadership challenge to some third party, and then you're going to put a director in to implement what the third party came up with?
The purpose of engaging with the outside parties is to make sure that we got the best expertise from out. We have to do this differently.
Why not just hire a good leader?
We have to do this differently than the past. We want to make sure that we've got the right plan and that we're implementing those steps immediately.
It sounds to me like the plan is that we're going to come up with a committee that's designed to delay action while Grunberg rides out the rest of the Biden administration and continues his time there. Mr. McKernan, how long has Director Grunberg been at the FDIC?
20 years, as I understand.
20 years. How long has he been leading it?
10 of the last 13.
10 of the last 13 years he's been leading it. You think he's had anything to do with poisoning this culture?
I think the chairman's ultimately accountable for the culture.
Yeah, generally that's the answer. The leader, everything that happens or fails to happen in an organization is ultimately the top leader's responsibility. That doesn't mean he's the one that did everything, but ultimately that's the duty of leadership. And anyone can find an excuse. It seems like Grunberg's full of them. Leaders find a way. Director Sue, do you think Grunberg's going to find a way?
Again, I'm focused on what I can control.
So if you give him a good
it's really about
outside third-party outsourced solution, you think he could follow it with any credibility?
The purpose of having the outside expertise is to make sure that the agency is doing the best it can for the employees of the agency.
What's the due date for that? Around January 21st, 2025?
No, it's right now. We have to do these things right now.
I know we do, but you're outsourcing it to some third party. They're supposed to get back to you around January 21st?
No, the hiring of the third party, both the expert and the monitor, it is currently in process right now. And we are also going to restructure the broken internal process that has led to retaliation.
Well, it might take till January 21st to get rid of Director Grunberg, but I'm pretty sure it'll be done right around that time frame, if not before. So, Mr. McKernan, is there anything that we could do between now and January 21st to facilitate Director Grunberg's departure at the FDIC?
I don't know that I can speak to that, but I think that it's important that Congress continue to exercise its oversight role to hold us accountable, including the board, for making real actionable steps to get culture change moving.
Well, obviously, the President of the United States could fire him. That'd be great. No leadership coming from there. But Congress has the power of the purse. I mean, we're only funded till September 30th. In theory, we could eliminate funding for Director Grunberg's position beginning October 1st of this year. We have an opportunity coming up in the appropriations process. We have a Holman rule that would facilitate just such an action directed at Grunberg. Does anyone believe that would be appropriate to provide congressional accountability for Director Grunberg? Think we should keep him in place, or do you think we should continue to pay Director Grunberg? We're the ones that provide the funding for his paycheck. Should we keep him on the United States payroll? I mean, I was really encouraged to hear Mr. Varga talk about not defending the indefensible, but if we fund his paycheck into the next fiscal year, well, we're defending the indefensible. We shouldn't provide a dime to Director Grunberg. So I hope my colleagues will defund his payroll. And I hope it's a moot point, because Joe Biden could fire him this afternoon, and that'd be the appropriate action. Anywhere else, anyone doing these kinds of things would be walked out with a cardboard box that afternoon. And I hope that becomes norm within the FDIC to not tolerate these kinds of things, whether it's of the employees or the subordinate leaders that make up the chain of command. We need to fix this culture, and Congress can do that by holding Grunberg accountable with appropriations. I yield back.
Gentleman's time has expired. With that, the gentlewoman from Texas, Ms. Garcia, is recognized for 5 minutes.
Thank you so much, and thank you to the witnesses for being here. First, I want to start with Ms. Now that I'm so far away from you, I can't read your name plate because it's
Mainoo.
my eyes is not as good as it is when I sit up front. But you said something that caught my ear at the beginning. You said that this has gone on for far too long. I think it's your quote. And you went further and said that this was a long-standing and deeply ingrained. So if it goes back to the 80s, have you been able to age any of the 500 complaints? Like how many were in the 80s and the 90s and the 2000s, 2010s, 2020s, so that we can get a better idea of how ingrained it is?
To give a better idea of our findings, we included in our report what we thought was necessary to understand our findings and support our recommendations.
The question is, did you age the findings? Okay, well, let me ask you this: was there more in the 20s or more prior to 2000, or was there more in the 80s?
So in the representative examples, the nearly 50 representative examples we included in the report, where we had dates,
because I know that a lot of the samples, a lot of pages are like this. They're redacted. Okay, there's redactions in probably 5, 6, 10 pages. So it says examples on page A4, but I have like 2 pages of redactions.
Right. So what I was saying was that—
an idea, ma'am, simple question. Did you age the allegations? It really is a yes or no.
We aged allegations, and most of the examples in the appendix that you were just referring to, where there are dates, most of those are from within the past 5 years.
5 years. Okay, well, that's good to know. Because it struck me that the OIG report did make a recommendation regarding this back in 2020. Suggested that the FDIC develop a more formalized strategy to promote a harassment-free workplace. In response, the agency wrote, and again, this is 2020, the FDIC disagrees that development of new strategies is required because the FDIC currently has a robust, multifaceted strategy in place designed to promote a culture of diversity, inclusivity, and an environment in which harassment is not tolerated. So they thought everything was hunky-dory, apparently, in 2020. You recall who the chair was then?
The chair in 2020 was Chair McWilliams.
Oh, right. So that was not Mr. Grunberg.
Correct, it was not Mr. Grunberg who was the chair then.
So when he came in the following McWilliams, he saw the OIG report that said, we disagree, we're doing fine. We don't need a new strategy. So that sort of kind of caught my attention because there seems to be so much focus and it should be on the current chairman, when in fact there's been other previous chairmen, both Democrat and Republican, appointed by both Democrat and Republican presidents. So it is a problem for the agency, and it's something that needs to be worked on, but it seems like the agency has resisted some of this. Mr. McKernan, you've been on now for how many years?
About a year and a half.
All right. So I know you said even today that the board bears responsibility and that the board should be more involved. So in your 1.5 years, what have you done or what have you initiated to take care of some of these issues that you yourself say we need to take steps to address these problems? So what steps have you taken, sir?
So when the reports came out in the press in November, I'd been there about, 10 months. And what I did was championed an independent review. We initially had a review that was going to be overseen by the chairman and staff. That review was candidly very narrow in scope with a very limited budget. It was not a real review. It was not a top to bottom review. I found that very objectionable. Worked very hard on the board to get us to do a real review, an independent review. Director Sue was very constructive to that end, and now we're here today talking about that review.
So anything else that you've done that you can share to us to?
Currently, we're having a relatively contentious debate on the board about exactly what the board's role is going forward. I'm one vote among 5. I think we need to really reconsider how the board approaches the oversight of the action plan.
Thank you. And Mr. Chairman, I have a unanimous consent.
Without objection.
Unanimous consent to enter the record an article from the Bloomberg. Biden is poised to pick Goldsmith Romero to lead overhaul at FDIC. Ask for unanimous consent.
Without objection.
Thank you.
The gentleman from West Virginia, Mr. Mooney, is now recognized for 5 minutes.
In West Virginia, we have a lot of small banks. I met with some of them last year after the Silicon Valley Bank was given the systemic risk exception. Most of them were of the view that no banks in West Virginia would have been given that exception. It's my first chance to speak to folks from FDIC since then, so my questions are really directed at Mr. McKernan and Mr. Sue about the failure of Silicon Valley Bank. Silicon Valley Bank was a comparatively smaller financial institution, and many policymakers and politicians were skeptical about invoking the systemic risk exception for Silicon Valley Bank, while others, particularly those with large ties to interests in the Silicon Valley, supported making the bank's accounts holders completely whole. Would you say, isn't it true that the Silicon Valley Bank was not an obvious candidate for the invocation of the systemic risk exception? Mr. Sue?
The board, the FDIC board decided unanimously to invoke the systemic risk exception at that time based on a lot of analysis and discussion.
I would certainly agree, Congressman, that it was not an obvious candidate, and that was probably one of the harder decisions I've had to make in my life. And candidly, I wouldn't begrudge anyone who wanted to criticize me for it, because depending on what side of the bed I wake up on, I sometimes wonder if I made the right decision.
I appreciate that. I know we make the laws here, and you do your best to implement them, and there's a lot of gray areas in that. But let me ask a follow-up question. Isn't it also true that as a part of the analysis regarding the invocation of the systemic risk exception for Silicon Valley Bank, that an important concern relayed to the FDIC was, especially the decision was made, that it would be important to prevent money from going to Chinese interests? So what did the FDIC do to analyze whether the FDIC would be funding Chinese interests, and how the FDIC go about preventing it, Mr. McKernan?
Congressman, I can't speak to that. Happy to take that question back, but that was certainly not something I was looking at the board. I was looking at the time. What was central to my decision making is we had also signature that same weekend, and although it was not obvious to others at the time, First Republic was right there as well. I put the 3 together was really what got me to yes.
Okay. Sue, any thoughts on that?
I'd have to get back to you as to your question.
All right. I've also then been alerted to the fact that the FDIC chose to insure certain foreign Eurodollar sweep accounts for a failed bank, which would be in violation of 12 CFR Section 36.8, which expressly states that the insurability of funds associated with sweep accounts maintained by foreign branches is to be determined as of the end of business status of the funds. Instead, FDIC chose to interrupt the cycle and pay out the accounts as if the money was stationary in the United States. Why did the FDIC bend the rules on that?
Congressman, that's another question I'll have to take back.
Okay. I have time for one more question. Changing back to the earlier discussion, if Mr. Grunberg were to step down and the current vice chairman becomes the acting chairman, would the FDIC continue to function and carry out its mission? Yes or no?
Absolutely. The FDIC's functioned without a full board for quite some time.
Yeah. Anybody else want to opine on that one? Well, let's just say the bylaws clearly state that there's a solution in place. If Mr. Grunberg were to step down, resign today, he's already told the staff they need to prepare for him to stay through the end of the year. The staff went from hoping for a fresh start to now being stressed about the future of the agency, defeated and unable to adequately do their jobs. So that would be a good option, I would say. So, Mr. Chairman, that's really it for my questions. I yield back the balance of my time.
Gentleman yields back. The gentlewoman from Massachusetts, Ms. Presley, is now recognized for 5 minutes.
Thank you, Mr. Chair, and thank you all for being here. First, I want to say I'm encouraged to see a more representative table today. I'm glad that there is a woman at this table and that there is diverse representation at this table, given the experiences both of racial discrimination, microaggression, hostilities, and also sexual harassment. I remain deeply concerned about accountability and recourse following the inaction to address essential workers' rights at the FDIC. I did not parse words when Mr. Grunberg was before this committee, and I certainly won't today. I appreciate that he has taken the appropriate step of tendering his resignation, effective immediately following Senate confirmation of his successor. Let me be clear, those on the other side of the aisle do not come to this conversation in good faith. They see an opportunity to gut critical federal regulatory work, and they are going after it. That aside, let me be clear. The FDIC must prioritize recourse for workers and accountability for wrongdoers. Mr. Kim, based on this report, it's just not clear to me who at the FDIC directly contributed to the recommendations section.
Sorry, who directly contributed to the recommendation section?
Yes.
The report was entirely the work of the Cleary Gottlieb team, and we both reached our factual findings and the analyses and developed the recommendations.
Okay, let me just unpack that. I'll be a little bit more precise. What role did employees, current or former, who were actually impacted by these adverse experiences at the FDIC play in contributing to the recommendations?
Thank you for that clarification. Of course, the entirety of our report are based on facts that we learned from speaking with people at the FDIC, current and former, as well as the documents. We came in with no personal knowledge of what was going on at the FDIC, which is why we started in our remarks today to emphasize the emotion that we heard from people who were reporting. The entirety of the findings and the recommendations are based on what we learned from the FDIC. In terms of the recommendations, there were many people within the FDIC, particularly those who were part of employee resource groups, who had very good ideas about what to do, and we understood that they had contributed in part to the development of the action plan. But in our interviews with them, we also asked them, those who had experienced these issues, those who were part of the process, asked them, how do you think this could be improved?
Okay.
And a lot of that was reflected in our recommendations as well.
I have some other questions I need to get to, but that is so critically important. It's essential to healing for those who were adversely impacted. And I'm just a firm believer that those closest to the pain should be closest to the power, driving and informing the policy making. And that is certainly true for survivors' justice. So I hope that they will continue to be actively engaged and their input solicited. So important that you're partnering with them because they're experts in addressing sexual harassment and protecting workers' rights. Mr. Kim, in the report it states that FDIC did not concur with 2 of OIG's recommendations on proportionate and consistent disciplinary action for substantiated harassment. What were 2 recommendations, and why did the FDIC oppose them?
We understand that after the OIG report, Office of the Inspector General report in 2020, that the FDIC took issue
Sorry,
with.
Mr. Kim, I'm running out of time, so could you just tell me?
We don't know
what were the
exactly
2?
on what basis
Why?
that the
Okay.
FDIC resisted those.
Okay, all right. Well, no one, and I repeat, no one should ever be subjected to sexual harassment in the workplace. This is an issue that affects people of all walks of life in workplaces throughout America, and that is why I will be introducing the Be Heard in the Workplace Act. This is anti-harassment, survivor-focused legislation that will codify critical changes to prevent workplace harassment and discrimination and enable workers to seek accountability and justice. It was drafted in close partnership with survivors, civil rights lawyers, and workers' rights advocates. This bill prohibits mandatory arbitration and non-disclosure agreements from covering up harassment. It expands the jurisdiction of the Equal Employment Opportunity Commission, and it outlines a clear legal pathway for survivors to seek legal redress through the court system. The Be Heard in the Workplace Act is essential to protecting workers and ensuring accountability for discrimination, harassment, and abuse. I want every worker to know that we don't just care about your labor, we give a damn about your lives. And every worker should be able to do their job with safety, dignity, and respect. Thank you.
Gentlewoman yields back. The gentleman from Tennessee, Mr. Rose, is now recognized for 5 minutes.
I want to thank Chairman McHenry and Ranking Member Waters for holding the hearing, and thank you to our witnesses for being with us today. Director Sue, as the founder and operator of a business, I know just how important values are as a guiding beacon to employees. At the Federal Deposit Insurance Corporation, you have the stated values of integrity, competence, teamwork, effectiveness, accountability, and fairness. I'm sure your nod indicates you're aware of that. Director Sue, the FDIC describes the value of integrity as adhering to the highest ethical and professional standards. Based on the FDIC definition of integrity, does Chair Grunberg yelling at his staff meet the standard of integrity? Yes or no?
Any misconduct does not meet that standard.
I think you're right. And Director Sue, the FDIC describes the value of teamwork as communicating and collaborating effectively with one another. Based on the FDIC definition of teamwork, does Chair Grunberg's staff being afraid to give him bad news sound like he meets the value of teamwork? Yes or no?
Fear is not a part of teamwork.
And Director Sue, the FDIC describes the value of fairness as respecting individual viewpoints and treating others with dignity and trust. Based on the FDIC definition of fairness, does your staff not having trust in the chair to write to him with concerns like they did with Chair Bear or McWilliams indicate that he meets the value? Yes or no?
Trust is critical. We need to work extremely hard to rebuild trust with the staff of the FDIC.
So let's be honest, Director Sue. Chair Greenberg does not embody the values of the FDIC. Employees are working in fear at the agency as we speak. I grew up on a farm, and early in my life, I learned from my grandmother that when the fox is in the hen house, you have to get it out. You don't leave it there for months and months and expect not to suffer continual damage. And so, while I can appreciate Chair Grunberg's decision to resign, frankly, it needs to happen now. And having it happen months from now puts the country and certainly the institution of the FDIC at risk. Director McKernan, as you consider the values of integrity, competence, teamwork, effectiveness, accountability, and fairness that are supposed to guide the Federal Deposit Insurance Corporation, did your review of the Cleary Gottlieb report and personal experience at the FDIC find a culture reflective of those values?
No, you can't read the report and think that our culture is consistent with the values.
And Mr. Kim, the report outlines that employees do not have trust in the reporting process, even though the FDIC has over 5 offices for employees to take their reports. What were you hearing from employees that drew Cleary to that conclusion?
We were hearing both that there was confusion in the reporting processes, that there were a number of different places that they could report, but there was not a uniform understanding of which reporting channel was for what. And then there was concern expressed to us that some of the reviews following reports were conducted by groups that had management's interests more in mind than the complainants, and raised credibility questions about those reviews.
So I can't help but hear what I've heard from each of you today and not reflect back to January 20th, 2021, when President Biden said that everyone is entitled to be treated with decency and dignity. And I agree with the president, that's true. He went on to say that you treat another colleague with disrespect, talk down to someone, I promise you I will fire you on the spot. On the spot, no ifs or buts. It sounds to me like that admonition is not being taken to heart with respect to Chair Grunberg. And I would suggest that Chair Grunberg should reflect on that, and I hope the administration will reflect on that very clear admonition. And I trust that my colleagues on the other side understand the clarity, at least in the words of President Biden. And I think it's time for that clarity to be implemented. With that, Mr. Chairman, I yield back.
Gentleman from Tennessee yields back. Gentlewoman from Michigan, Ms. Gottlieb, is now recognized for 5 minutes.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. You know, the question is, how can you address a problem that you can't see? So one longstanding issue, and I know I feel like maybe some of my colleagues have brought it up, is documented in both the 2020 Inspector General report and the Cleary report, was the lack of centralized database tracking and documenting harassment claims and the investigations at the FDIC. And before, I think, 2020, the internal records were maintained in like a hard copy file system held by specific individuals there and stored electronically in FDIC's, what they call the Corporate Human Resources Information System, CRIS. So from 2008 to 2021, the CRIS system documented only 2 cases. From 2008 to 2021, the CRIS system documented only 2 cases of sexual harassment and just 7 cases of harassment. Mr. Kim and Ms. Mainoo, given that 2009 Office of Inspector General survey found that 8% of FDIC respondents had experienced sexual harassment from 2015 to 2019, is there any reason to believe that CRIS database records from 2008 to 2021 were complete or accurate?
There's no reason to believe that the CRIS database was complete.
Okay. In terms of tracking workplace misconduct, how would you characterize the FDIC's data collection and management practices for both of you?
Currently,
yes.
We understand that the group within the Human Resources division at the FDIC within the Division of Administration has taken steps more recently to improve centralized and systematic record keeping. In the past year, we
Is this based on their action plan? Is this?
No, this actually predates the action plan.
Okay.
We understand that in the past year, that group specifically has introduced a system that now tracks different types of interpersonal misconduct so that it allows the FDIC to identify sexual harassment, for example, compared to hostile work environment, and also identifies whether misconduct falls under the FDIC's anti-harassment program, which the records before did not do.
So, and I'm not rolling my eyes at you, it's just really bizarre that they would do it. So FDIC's December 2023 action plan, Mr. So, one of the stated goals was to, quote, enhance the centralized tracking system for monitoring sexual harassment claims. The projected completion of this was February 29th of this year. So either Mr. McKernan or Mr. Sue, has this action item been successfully completed? If so, what specific steps were taken to improve the FDIC's ability to track misconduct?
I'm not aware of whether it's actually completed, and even if we're saying it's completed, I won't believe it until I see some independent validation that it's completed.
So I agree with Director McKernan. The completion of the action plan for that particular database, it's only going to work if people feel safe to
I see.
report. And
There's
that's
no
a really,
trust.
that's the really,
Yeah.
that's the fundamental
Makes
thing that
sense.
needs to be addressed.
Yeah, I actually talked to him about that. People have lost a lot of trust. So staying on the topic of collecting and tracking information, 2021 Office of Inspector General report found that FDIC does not have a systematic or process for collecting, right? Or analyzing employee retention data, for instance. According to the Cleary report, FDIC revised its retention tracking process in 2023. So either Mr. Sue or Mr. McKernan, what is FDIC's current process tracking retention records, employee retention records? Anybody know?
So my understanding is that there are projects to improve these. Again, I think, but as board members, our focus is we really need to change both structure and
Mr.
culture.
Sue, because I know when people start leaving, right, or something's wrong. Like, you know how you know? So I'm trying to figure out what percentage of employees who leave the FDIC complete exit surveys. What are we doing there? Because that can always help with indicating whether or not there's a pattern of sexual harassment, there is something wrong, there's, getting to the root cause of turnover, whatever you want to call it. Again, we're talking about retention and how important exit interviews are.
Yes, I believe that's been identified in the report as something that needs to be improved as part of the action plan in concert with these other steps. They all have to move together.
But there are doing exit interviews right now.
I have to get back to you. We have to get back to you on that.
You don't do exit interviews right now?
I don't want to misspeak.
Okay.
I want to make sure we get back to
That's really important. And especially in such a large organization right now, especially, thank you, Mr. Chair, I yield.
Gentlewoman yields back. I now recognize myself for 5 minutes. Thank you to all of our witnesses for being here today. The independent report from Cleary Gottlieb on the FDIC's workplace culture and the conduct of Chairman Martin Gruenberg are disturbing. The report makes a number of recommendations for the future of the FDIC. Let's review what some of those are. Number one, calls for the access to the chairperson. This recommendation would ensure that the mental health resources developed as a result of the recommendations would have an audience with the chair and other executives in order to make those cultural changes. Chairman Gruenberg is not just a symptom of the culture, he has become so ingrained in the culture that it's indistinguishable from his personal leadership. You can't shake up the order of things when you are the ultimate symbol of the old regime. Number two, a recommendation calls for a 360 review of all leadership to ensure accountability. Let's take a look at Chairman Gruenberg's history to get a sense of how he might receive the constructive feedback resulting from this review. In the report, one executive stated that Gruenberg's actions have the effect of chilling open conversations. Another said that there is, quote, a great reluctance to deliver bad news to Marty Gruenberg, end quote. In November 2020, when overseeing a bank acquisition, the officers of the acquiring bank did not wear masks to a meeting because the state where the meeting took place did not have a mask mandate at the time. Chairman Gruenberg, quote unquote, lost it when he heard the bankers did not wear masks, and he took his rage out on his own staff. It got so bad that one employee was the target of this behavior and said, and I quote, I might cry, I want to quit, end quote. Finally, when confronted with the fallout from the Wall Street Journal story about Gruenberg's unacceptable conduct, the chairman refused to believe the story's descriptions of his own behavior, prompting one executive to leave the room in outrage. Given this pattern of behavior, can we really expect Chairman Gruenberg to faithfully implement these cultural changes, particularly ones that would require his personal buy-in as chairman? Some of my colleagues have already brought up an issue I'd like to focus more on: the prospects of a quick Senate confirmation process. We all know the Senate does not like to move quickly, and I would expect nothing different in this case. Chairman Gruenberg has vowed to remain at his post and told employees to prepare for him to stay through the end of the year. We're talking about someone who has served as an acting chairman 3 times over the course of his career. A large chunk of his career has been spent with interim titles. Chairman Gruenberg is still the FDIC because of his refusal to leave at the end of his last chairmanship. Director Sue, how do you feel that Chairman Gruenberg is the correct person to implement the changes recommended in this report in the long term?
Thank you for the question. I'm focused on what I can control. What I can control are the actions of the board.
But I'm
to work
asking
to
you for
protect the
your
employees
opinion.
of
Do you
the
think that
FDIC.
he is the correct person to do this?
Again, I'm focused on what I can control. So I'm really focused on trying to get in place the
Director
cultural
Sue,
and
you're
structural
not
transformation.
responding to my question. Let's go to my next question. Are you comfortable with Chairman Gruenberg staying in his post on an interim basis?
Again, I'm focused on these actions. These
Are you
actions have to
comfortable?
get done. As long as he is focused on delivering and he delivers on the comments and on the commitments to take actions, that's what's really, really critical. I'm open. I will work with whoever the chair is, but that's really important is to focus on those actions.
Director Sue, as we both know, the Senate confirmation process could take a long time. All the while, the FDIC employees are being asked to wait for leadership required to make this cultural transformation. How long do you think they have to wait?
They're not going to wait. We are going to take action immediately. We're
So
taking
you're
action on the critical
confident
parts.
that he can do this, that Mr. Gruenberg can do this? You said they don't have to wait. He's still there.
We are taking action.
Okay.
We are taking action.
Does that mean you're comfortable with him doing this job?
I can control what I can control. We are taking action on the expert, on the monitor, on standing up a new structure so that people don't have fear of retaliation. Those are the things that I'm focused on.
There are thousands of employees at the FDIC that are banking on this changing. And we've got the same person at the top that has not demonstrated a willingness to tackle this problem. In fact, people are afraid to go to him and even talk about it. So I express the lack of confidence that I have as a member of this committee in seeing things change. With that, thank you. I yield back. The gentleman from Wisconsin, Mr. Stile, who is also the chair of the House Administration Committee, is now recognized for 5 minutes.
Thank you very much, Mr. Chairman. Mr. Sue, after the Wall Street Journal published its reports in November, Chairman Gruenberg announced he had already hired Baker Hostetler to conduct a third-party review. Then a week later, the FDIC Board of Directors established a special review committee to oversee a third-party review. Why did the board believe it was necessary to create a special committee and hire an outside law firm to conduct the review?
The board unanimously voted to create the special review committee to ensure that there's independence and credibility with regard to that review.
And would there be a concern that there'd be a lack of credibility or independence if that review would have been selected by Mr. Gruenberg?
I think that's implied within that resolution, yes.
Okay, so let me jump to you, Mr. McKernan, if I can. From my understanding, Baker Hostetler was already investigating the FDIC when Cleary Gottlieb was chosen, as just discussed. Whose decision was it to scrap Baker Hostetler's investigation?
Special Review Committee made the decision to go with Cleary instead of Baker.
So is the Special Review Committee not the full FDIC board?
That's right, just Director Sue and I.
And could you also comment again as to why, and see if you agree here with Mr. Sue as to why Cleary Gottlieb was chosen instead of Baker Hostetler?
Well, the way I looked at it is we had to have an independent review, not a chairman-driven or staff-driven review. You can't investigate yourself. You have to have someone from the outside. The best we've got are independent directors. Also, when you looked at the terms of the Baker engagement, raised real questions around the independence. It was very narrow in scope. It was very limited in budget. I thought that was part of the reason we made a strong case for a separate committee of the board to lead the investigation.
Thank you very much. Back to you, Mr. Sue, if I can. There's a long history of incidents involving Chairman Gruenberg's temper at the FDIC, predating, obviously, the Wall Street Journal reporting. Were you aware of the internal FDIC investigation in 2008 into Gruenberg's behavior before the Wall Street Journal articles appeared?
No.
You were not formally aware, you had no knowledge that any review had been conducted?
No. I was not aware of either formally or informally.
So there wasn't any casual conversation at the workplace or on the water cooler that this review might be ongoing?
I was not aware, no.
You're not aware. Mr. Director McKernan, if I can come back to you, were you aware?
Just make sure I understand the question. Was I aware of the 2008 investigation?
Prior to the Wall Street Journal article?
Yeah, I had heard rumors about it.
And so you had heard rumors. Did you have full evidence? Walk me through what that looked like to you.
So, scratching back, how did I know and what did I know then?
It was just casual conversation amongst employees of the FDIC that this review by a supposed, what we can have the discussion as to independence of the law firm, but a law firm review of the behavior of the chairman. Was that just water cooler talk around?
There's a lot of open secrets, as you know, in DC, and this was one of those, that there had been an issue in 2008 and also an investigation.
And you would say, was it widely known at the FDIC?
At the FDIC, that I can't speak to. I don't know.
Where was it widely known, or where would you have thought that this would have been a casual conversation two individuals might have had?
I was a Senate staffer at the time, and I think folks knew then.
So Senate staffers who were involved in the broader, probably Senate Banking Committee then, would have had general knowledge that this was ongoing.
That there was I was speaking to the fact of the investigation.
That an investigation was ongoing.
Oh, no, I'm sorry, that there had been an investigation.
That there had been an investigation, but not that the Baker Hustler was conducting a review.
Oh, I'm sorry. No, the Baker thing came out of the Wall Street Journal reporting.
So you did not, so great, so this is good that we're diving into it. So you did not have knowledge that the Baker Hustler review was ongoing until you read about it in the Wall Street Journal?
Oh, that's right. Where did I learn? I don't remember where I learned about the Baker. I think it was actually at the hearings immediately after the Wall Street Journal reporting.
But after the Wall Street Journal reporting, it was not part of a casual conversation you had with people.
Right.
You had heard the casual conversation, there were problems at the FDIC. That was, I think, reasonably well known, and it has now been fully exposed to the level that it was. But but the Baker Hustler review, you were unaware of.
Board's attention, which is a problem because the board is supposed to act on major matters. Instead, the chairman retained a firm to do an investigation, which would have attracted a lot of publicity without alerting the board.
Thank you. In my limited time, I just think it's so important here that Chairman Grunberg should resign. He should have never been involved in the initial review with a third party for the exact reasons that you identified for us here today. Is noted by Mr. Rose, re-quoting President Biden. He's saying he has no ifs, ands, or buts about whether or not someone engaged in this action should be terminated. He should be terminated. He engaged in the action, and to me, it's pretty clear as to what's going on. The administration is concerned about the policies, and they're willing to put their agenda ahead of protecting people. Mr. Chairman, I yield back.
Gentleman from Wisconsin yields back. The gentleman from Pennsylvania, Mr. Muser, is now recognized for 5 minutes.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. So, Mr. Sue, who has been fired or put on leave at the FDIC or separated from employees that they allegedly have been abusing and harassing?
My understanding is that there have been 4 individuals who have been separated from the agency.
Okay, and you support that?
I have some indirect knowledge of that. I don't have direct. I was not directly involved with those things.
Mm-hmm. And what they did apparently was more serious than any accountability of Mr. Grunberg, in your view?
I don't think I'm at liberty to talk about the specifics around that, but my understanding is that there have been 4 separations based.
Why not? You're in the testimony. Why not?
I think there are there are protections around privacy and
You're
personnel.
doing a lot of protecting, Mr. Sue, a lot of protecting.
My
It's
point
not,
is
it's
not-
not loyalty, it's destructive to the FDIC.
My point is-
You're missing the picture, in my view, sir. You're missing the picture. So you inform Representative Meeks that you feel Mr. Grunberg can restore trust and credibility at the FDIC. You said, yes, you do. So you condone how he's handled things at the FDIC, and you think he's the right person, the only person that can correct the situation that was created under his leadership. Does that make any sense to you?
I understand the question. I don't condone any actions that are inappropriate. My focus is on the actions that are going to restore trust with the employees of the FDIC. That's where my focus is.
Okay, you keep saying action. What about his inaction? What about the inaction of many of the supervisors that were there? They should all be under scrutiny and carefully reviewed. I mean, it sounds like a madhouse that took place here.
So currently, there are 3 critical actions that are being considered, that are under, both being supported and considered by the board: the hiring of the expert, the hiring of the monitor, standing up a new structure so that there's no fear of retaliation. Those are all being done by the full board engagement.
Oh, it sounds like one heck of a bureaucratic committee reviewing this, which will apparently take months. Meanwhile, leaving Mr. Grunberg there and leaving employees in a state of malfunction and dysfunction and disarray. When did you first learn of this chaos taking place?
I read it in the Wall Street Journal article. Like,
was the first time you heard of it?
Yes.
Huh.
Very disturbing.
Were you surprised?
I was very bothered by it. Yes.
Okay. Mr. McKernan, when was the first time you heard about? You said you heard rumors years back.
So to be specific here, I heard, I think maybe in September, August, that the journal was looking into workplace culture issues.
Were you surprised to hear it?
About the workplace culture issues?
Yeah.
I didn't hear much about in September, August around what the journal was going to report, so I was deeply shocked when I actually saw the stories in November.
All right, so everybody was shocked, everybody was surprised, just heard about it, read about it in the paper. Yet, how much involvement do you have with the, on a monthly basis with the FDIC?
I'm a director, so we have monthly board meetings, and then there's meetings in between to deal with board matters.
HR's never in those meetings?
HR is
You
general.
don't pay any attention to it? 6,000 employees, you don't pay, no reason for the board to pay attention to the issues that their 6,000 employees have?
The board is ultimately responsible for the agency, and so we need to take care of the employees.
So let me ask you this. You have 4 divisions within your agency, right, that you oversee. If one of your division directors, this was occurring within their division, how would you handle that with that division director?
So misconduct.
Same way? Would you leave him there? Would you say, hey, you know what? I know this has been a mess for years. Women have been harassed, men have been harassed, all kinds of abuses taking place, lawsuits, right? I mean, you name it, it's bad. But I'm gonna keep you there because I want you now to fix the mess that you made.
No.
Well, that's what you're doing with Mr. Grunberg.
So wrongdoers must be held accountable. They will be held
How is it any different than what's happening with Mr. Grunberg?
Mr. Grunberg was not cited as a root cause of the problems at the FDIC in the report. He's not cited as a root cause. There are recommendations which should lay out the actions.
So
that
it needs to
the
be a
agency
root
needs.
cause. So your division director, you'd find out if he was part of the root cause. Mr. McKernan, do you agree with that? Do you think that's a good management policy?
No, as I've said, I think we really need a fresh start, and the sooner the better at the building.
Sooner the better. So why not today? I yield back, Mr. Chairman.
Gentleman from Pennsylvania yields back. The gentleman from Wisconsin, Mr. Fitzgerald, is now recognized for 5 minutes.
Thank you, Chairman. Apologize, we have judiciary going on at the same time. We're all appalled at the findings of the report and the toxic culture at the FDIC. Last year discovers CEO Roger Hochschild quickly resigned after regulatory issues surfaced. Similarly, in March, New York Community Bank CEO stepped down following the bank's near collapse. In neither case did a CEO wait around until permanent successor was in place. To Commissioner McKernan, do you agree that a responsible regulator would not be doing its job if it let a bank CEO stick around for similar conduct that was reported in the Clearly Gottlieb investigation?
I guess hypotheticals are always dangerous, but it is hard to imagine. Hard to imagine a bank regulator would let management stick around.
Yeah, thank you. Comptroller Sue, same question to you. Would a responsible regulator allow a CEO to stick around until a permanent replacement is found despite the misconduct that's happened under the watch, yes or no?
A responsible regulator will take the steps necessary to ensure the safety and soundness of the institution.
Mr. Kim and Ms. Mainoo, I'd like to discuss your recommendation of the 360 review of a chairperson or chairperson's direct reports. Can you briefly describe this 360 review? Mr. Kim?
Yes, we believed that it would be important for the leadership to have the 360 review to be informed of the views and perspective, both of people to whom they report, but also to those who report to them.
Ms. Mainoo, can you answer the same question?
Yes, and just to add to what Mr. Kim said, we also heard when we spoke with FDIC employees as well as reviewing records of recommendations that employee resource groups have made in the past, that there is interest by FDIC employees in 360-degree reviews, and so we included that as one of our recommendations.
And your recommendation states that the 360 review should occur for at least the first 2 years by independent third party. Is that correct?
That's correct.
Do you think this should be the same third party that will be working with the transformation monitor on the culture change, or do you see this as being a completely separate third party from the culture change role?
As we say in the report, the independent third party may or may not be the same
Okay, so the Cleary report highlighted the misconduct of Chairman Grunberg's in the reports section on findings. Do you think that your team would have still offered this recommendation if you had not found misconduct perpetuated by the chairman? Mr. Kim, can you answer that?
I believe we saw value in the 360 reviews, regardless of who's the chairman, and would have recommended a similar review.
And because of the report highlighted the misconduct of current chairman of the FDIC, do you think the information obtained by the 360 review should be submitted to Congress to assist on our oversight efforts of culture change?
Our view was that it should be conducted by an independent party so that they're not worried about concerns or fear that management would hear about it. I don't think we recommended that it be made public or provided to Congress. I do think there are some questions about how open someone will be in their 360 reviews if they know it's going to be provided publicly. So that is not part of our recommendation that it be provided to Congress.
Thank you. Chairman, I yield back.
Gentleman yields back. The gentlewoman from California, Mrs. Kim, is now recognized for 5 minutes.
Thank you, Mr. Su, and witnesses. Thank you for being here with us. Mr. Su, in a joint statement that is issued by you and Director McKernan to announce the release of the Cleary Gottlieb report, you say the report, in quote, "It put the people of the FDIC first and focused on identifying root causes," end quote. You also noted that it was balanced, focused, and nonpartisan report. So do you still stand by this statement and sentiment that the Cleary report put the people of the FDIC first?
Yes.
You do. Mr. Su, then, do you agree with the Cleary report's assessment that Chairman Grunberg's attributes hinder his ability to establish trust and confidence in leading a meaningful culture change at the FDIC? Because based on your statement regarding that report, you must agree that it is time for new leadership in order to put the people of the FDIC first.
I agree with the report's conclusions that his actions present unique challenges to building trust with the staff, and that's why I'm very focused on actions.
So do you still support Chairman Grunberg?
I'm focused on what I can control. What I can control is influencing the board to take the actions that are necessary to reestablish trust with the staff. That's where my focus is.
Okay, you know, one of the recommendations of the report was for victims of abuse and harassment to have access to chairman of the FDIC, but that it stands today, unfortunately, it seems to be counterintuitive for those victims. Former Chairman McWilliams, for example, he spent a lot of time with the staff in cafeteria and rode the bus from Virginia Square to the other offices, where Chairman Grunberg spends his time with only his small circle of trusted advisors. So let me ask you a question, Mr. Kim. Based upon your investigation, do FDIC staff believe that Chairman Grunberg is an accessible chairman?
I don't think we put that question in that way, whether he's accessible. What we learned, we put in the report, which is that although many employees had positive relationships with him, there were a certain number, including certain direct reports, who had had difficult interactions with him. And then there was
I think the
a
point
general
of my question is, as chairman, shouldn't just surround himself with the top executive senior members only, but should be accessible to all employees, regardless of their status or ranks. That's the accessibility question that I'm having with you.
accessibility is obviously a good thing, and being more accessible obviously helps and improves workplace culture.
Well, let me ask the question to Mr. McKernan. If Chairman Grunberg does open his door to victims of harassment, do you think that the findings made about his behavior towards staff would make employees hesitant to approach the chairman directly?
I think, given the reputation is documented in the Cleary report, I suspect that would be challenging for some.
So, can you answer the same question? Why do you think it's important that the chairman is accessible to his employees, regardless of their status, rank, position?
One of the things I certainly learned overseeing the investigation is you cannot as a leader, rely simply on the formal reporting channels they break down. You have to have a real, like, deep-seated interest in trying to root out information, get your sense of the pulse through other informal mechanisms, and that requires that open rapport with the staff.
You know, to be clear, this is a great recommendation. The FDIC has a pervasive toxic culture, and because of that, employees should have a direct line to the chairman to report those issues. However, Chairman Grunberg at the helm, I'm not sure if the employees would benefit from direct access to him or would even want to have that available to them, for that matter. In the report, Cleary recommended that the FDIC hire an independent third party to advise and assist with the implementation of the recommendations, but I'm concerned that the leader of the office may feel a sense of loyalty to Chairman Grunberg. So Director McKernan, would it have been valuable for the Special Review Committee or other members, board members, to be involved in the decision-making process for setting up the office?
Yes, this is actually a topic of some debate now. This monitor is a critical choice for us. It had originally been contemplated. I learned about the process when the chairman announced it at the hearing.
Gentlewoman's time has expired.
Thank you.
Gentleman from New York, Mr. Lawler, is now recognized for 5 minutes.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Democrats say Chairman Grunberg was not aware of the deep-seated cultural issues at the FDIC until it was revealed by public reporting. When Chairman McWilliams took over at the FDIC, she immediately saw the cultural issues that were prevalent at the agency. Chairman McWilliams came to the FDIC with a goal to know the issues faced by employees and took time to ride the shuttle to the Arlington and DC campuses, eat lunch in the cafeteria, had an open door policy to hear employees' concerns. Through her outreach to employees, Chairman McWilliams noted that the toxic culture at the FDIC was readily apparent, and she began initiatives to improve the agency. Within the first 3 months of her tenure, Chairman McWilliams received a letter from anonymous African-American employees outlining a series of discriminatory acts at the FDIC. Chairman McWilliams worked with the employee resource groups and her staff to form employee-driven initiatives to fix the issues highlighted in the letter. And so, you know, when I look at this situation, some of my colleagues seem to believe that the report did a disservice to the FDIC because it focused only on the bad stories about Chairman Grunberg, and they believe the report downplayed these same concerns under prior chairman. Mr. Kim and Ms. Mainoo, as part of your investigation, did you review workplace culture under prior chairman of the FDIC other than Chairman Grunberg?
As we set forth in our report, we received reports from people who had suffered experiences that went back many years, and so our finding was that it did include information and reports during times that covered prior chairs as well.
And did you hear from any employees about any differences between the leadership of prior chairs and Chairman Grunberg's leadership?
Our focus was on the reports of incidents that they experienced and their experiences with respect to the workplace culture. As we note in the report, their experiences with respect to workplace culture we found were longstanding and deeply ingrained, I believe is the word that we use. So that led us to a number of the recommendations as well as the findings, but we found in terms of the workplace culture issues that it was something that was longstanding and not attributed to a particular chair.
Okay, in your review, do you recall employees reporting encounters with Chairman Baer or Chairman McWilliams where the employee described those chairmen as being unprofessional, aggressive, or hostile?
As I said, we were not focused on...
That's yes or no? Do you recall anybody in your review?
We do not recall anyone using those words.
Anybody say they were disrespected, disparaged, treated unfairly by those chairmen? Yes or no?
Not in the context of hotline reports, but in the context of discussing experiences with prior chairs. There were some who had noted that the former chairman, Sheila Bair, could at times be difficult as well.
Director McKernan, yes or no? Should Chairman Grunberg step down immediately?
Congressman, I think that's a decision for our elected leaders, but I would say we do need a fresh start, and the sooner the better.
So yes.
We need a fresh start sooner rather than later.
I'll take that as a yes. Isn't it true, shifting gears, isn't it true that when Silicon Valley Bank failed, it was not considered one of the large U.S. banks? In fact, it was not one of the top 10 largest banks in the U.S. at the time. And because of its comparatively small size, you understand that many of us on Capitol Hill have called into question why the systemic risk exception was invoked for Silicon Valley Bank. Many businesses in the tech industry had their money on deposit at Silicon Valley Bank, correct? Correct?
That's me, yes, yes.
And you understand that in most instances, their deposit accounts held far in excess of $250,000, correct?
That's my understanding.
Those politically connected companies would have lost lots of money without the systemic
Gentleman's
risk
time has expired.
exception, correct?
Gentleman's time has expired. The gentleman from Iowa, Mr. Nunn, is now recognized for 5 minutes.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Without objection, would like to yield my colleague from New York time required to finish his question.
Thank
Gentleman
you.
is recognized.
You agree those politically connected companies would have lost a lot of money without the systemic risk exception, correct?
The board of the FDIC voted unanimously for the systemic risk exception. I think as Director McKernan had noted in prior testimony, there was a lot going on at that time which supported that decision.
Okay. When the systemic risk exception was invoked, it was announced that everyone's money would be safe and insured, correct?
And the board decided unanimously to invoke the systemic risk exception.
Okay, and you're aware that the depositors base for Silicon Valley Bank included people from outside America, including significant Chinese interests, correct?
The purpose of invoking the systemic risk exception is to ensure that the financial stability of the United States is protected. And the board voted unanimously to do
Did companies with significant Chinese interests benefit from this decision?
Again, the decision to invoke the systemic risk exception focuses on protecting the financial stability of the United States.
Lastly, are you aware of any policies or directives within the FDIC regarding the treatment of Chinese depositors at Silicon Valley Bank?
I'm not aware of that. I have to get back to you on that.
Okay, thank you. Thank you to my colleague, Mr. Nunn.
Gentleman from Iowa is recognized for 3 minutes and 27 seconds.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. As those have noted, I'm incredibly disappointed the chairman chose not to be with us today. Clearly, the Gottlieb report about the FDIC's workplace culture concerning, to quote the 200-page report, the FDIC remains a good old boys club rife with sexual harassment, discrimination, and other inappropriate misconduct. Other descriptions of the agency include a particular insular hierarchy, risk-adverse culture, and a widespread fear of retaliation amongst the workforce that allowed misconduct to persist, including in the last 7 years alone, 92 harassment complaints made, 0 resulted in any removal, reduction in greater pay, or any disciplinary action more severe than a suspension, something endemic in Washington, D.C. Adding to this disturbing culture was the abuse by Chairman Grunberg's claim that he had no idea what was happening at the agency, even though he ran it for 10 of the last 13 years when these claims were made. I think one of the most frustrating parts here is how could anyone trust him when it was the Wall Street Journal who found this after just interviewing a few individuals. So, Director McKernan, I want to speak directly to you. Director McKernan, your resignation of examiners in training who are highly critical to our nation's economy doubled from 2001 until it hit a new high of 62 in the first 9 months of 2022. Only 48% of examiners hired in the agency remain since 2017. Do you believe the inability of the FDIC to retain talent affects your ability to help regulate my hometown banks in Iowa?
Certainly poses some risk.
I would agree. How does the ability to retain the quality staff impact our ability to police and support and help regulate our banks if these people have all left the job market?
I think it's a very important pressing question. If we can't get our staff retention issues fixed, it's going to continue to mount as a challenge for our mission.
Do you know if the FDIC has fired any employees in the wake of these reports?
The chairman's reported there has been 4 separations. It's my understanding that 3 of the 4 were resignations or retirements.
Do you believe, Director McKernan, that the chairman should have been the first person fired on this list?
Well, that is a question that is reserved to our elected leaders, but if I were asked by them my view on what's best for the agency, it's very clear to me that we need a fresh start and sooner rather than later.
I think 92 harassment cases would say he should have been gone, and I think an entire country is looking for dependable leadership that's clearly failed, and they're asking for his resignation. He should listen to the country. So with that, Comptroller Hsu, you've read the Wall Street article report titled "Strip Clubs, Lewd Photos, Boozy Hotels, the Toxic Atmosphere at the Bank Regulators FDIC" that was published a year ago. I'm glad to hear that I have an extra copy here if you've not read it. Was this just an accepted part of the culture that you were part of?
It's totally unacceptable.
I would agree with that. It's not just normal, as has been highlighted, correct?
Totally unacceptable.
Finally, one staffer was advised, just smile and make your supervisor feel good, as was reported in this.
You know, all the behaviors highlighted in that article are totally unacceptable, and the root causes of that are there's a culture and there's a structure at the FDIC which need to be transformed.
Concur. 20 women quit. We have a understaffed banking regulation. This is something the chairman needs to stand down.
Gentlemen's
and restart
time
that
has
culture.
expired. Gentlemen's
Thank you,
time
Mr.
has
Chair.
expired. I would like to thank all of our witnesses for their testimony today. Without objection, all members have 5 legislative days to submit additional written questions for the witnesses to the chair. The questions will be forwarded to the witnesses for a response. I'd ask our witnesses to please respond no later than August 1st, 2024. This hearing is adjourned.